Hello and welcome to stream. How are you? I hope you're well. We're starting. Today we're going to be looking at this video from Atlas at Simulation with Curt Jaimungal. They did an interview very recently. I watched a little bit of it yesterday, and man, I thought it was really fun. It was very fascinating, and I really think that there seems to have been a little bit of a mismatch in how they are engaging with each other, or maybe how they're engaging with themselves. I'm not really sure how to put that. But I want to try to evaluate what wavelengths, how different they are, and see if we can try to develop each side of that wavelength or superimpose them. I don't know why I'm making this metaphor right now. It's kind of getting jumbled. We've got two different people acting in two different ways, and I want to see if I can develop the way that Atlas is acting and understand where he's coming from, and then develop in the way that Curt is acting and engaging and develop in that sense also. Seems to me a little bit, well, we'll get into it. We don't want to, I didn't watch the whole thing yesterday, so I don't want to try to evaluate so much from the little I saw, but it seems that Curt, he's a sort of a sciencey kind of guy. Generally speaking, he has a channel called Theories of Everything, which is very good, and he goes over broad topics. A lot of time he goes over consciousness and things, but he himself is, I don't remember. He's a science, he likes science. I think he did physics and mathematics and something like that. I can't quite remember. So he's in that vein, that area of engaging and understanding the world, mostly in the sort of rationalist kind of area. He may be asking for clarification and maybe proof of things, so kind of empiricism. But I'm being very broad and vague here because I'm not entirely sure how to define his philosophy. But he's kind of in that area, and he's very open to spirituality and all this other nonsense that we like to talk about here. And of course, Atlas is kind of a spiritual weirdo. We really like the spirituality, and Atlas is going to be here. He's going to be trying to build a social connection, so he's going to be saying like, oh man, that was such a great question. He's saying things like that, and he's going to be very profound. At least he's going to try to be very profound. You know, he's going to be speaking in that way that sounds very grand, and it's not going to match. It's not going to land because they are on very different wavelengths. So I'm going to try to personally flip between them and develop on all sides of this. And also, kind of for myself, I wonder, I don't know how big of a deal the mismatch is. So when I watched a little bit of it, it seemed very striking to me. It seemed very, very weird the way that Atlas was responding to Curt's questions. And it didn't seem like they were getting along at all. But that was just me watching it for like a couple minutes. So I want to take a more broader look and see if maybe they actually were getting along, and maybe they both understood that they were kind of interacting in this sort of mismatched way, and you know, no hard feelings or nothing weird or no ill will or anything like that. Maybe nobody thought of each other as irrational or too rational or whichever insults we like to throw around. Anyway, let's jump right into it.
Woohoo! Yay! Theories of Everything with Curt Jaimungal.
Welcome. I mean, thank you.
So used to being the host.
Okay, they're both being silly. All right, they're both playing around. Atlas is a weird person, man. I love it so much. He's so weird. It's so fun.
How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Curt.
So
Did you just come from meditating?
life is a meditation, my brother.
Did you just explicitly meditate? Like close your eyes and stay still for a couple minutes, or no?
See, already, literally the first question. Did you come from meditation? And Atlas being the sort of weirdo, you know, this sort of spiritual weirdo nonsense kind of thing that we like to do here. Everything's a meditation, bro. There's no distinction, man. I'm always in the meditative state. And then Kurt's like, no. Specifically, actually, did you sit down and do a formal meditation? What was your actual procedure? What methods did you use? He didn't ask all these questions, but he wants a little bit more specificity here. So we can already see the mismatch. This is beautiful. I love it.
That is what
No question.
that usually is what leads up to meditation being what you are. So usually you go and practice meditation in order for you to end up having like a contemplative fitness AI that's perpetually running, in a sense. So you no longer need to go and separately meditate. It just becomes what you are perpetually. And so I feel like I've just recently sort of made that transition as well, where the amount of sovereignty that you end up having, the supreme authority over what used to be like this big web of conditioning and triggers and sensory perception, you gain so much sovereignty because you're able to watch the arising and passing of phenomena. And it's just regaining that awareness. And it's so beautiful.
Wow, bro. It is so beautiful, bro. Wow. Okay. Okay. He didn't answer the question. He didn't answer the question at all. He sort of kind of answered the question. Okay, we can imply, we can infer, we can understand. He said no. He could have just said no, but he gave all this lofty sort of background with this. He gave a lot of extra stuff that was not necessary for the question. Curt asked a very basic type of question. Did you meditate before this? Atlas says meditation is what happens for people who haven't reached a certain level where their entire life is meditation. And I feel like potentially maybe a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago or recently I've made this jump where all of my life is meditation. Okay, so did you meditate or not? This is probably going to be pushed forward throughout this entire conversation. At least from the little bit I saw, it's already here, where Curt is asking a very specific question that can get a very simple, easy answer. And Atlas is giving us these beautiful, wide answers that don't only apply to the actual question that was being asked. It's a more of an abstracted, dispersed sort of answer that doesn't quite answer the question, but it answers lots of other different types of questions that are kind of similar, kind of tangentially related, and we're off on the races here. So this is going to be lovely. But we can understand both sides of that, right? We can understand, yeah, you do want to be in the state where meditation is your entire life, right? And that's a beautiful thing to do. And I guess you want to teach and talk about that. Well, I guess that's important too. We want to know. Okay, we'll continue with the interview in a second, but I do want to know how the framing of this conversation, because that struck me when I was watching just a little bit of it yesterday. I didn't know what the framing of the conversation was. I didn't know who was trying to teach who. I didn't know who was asking what questions, and there was a bit of a flip. It seemed like Curt was asking more questions than Atlas was, even though this is an interview on Atlas's channel. Okay. Now I'm going off the rails like Atlas was. So let's bring it back.
So, yeah.
So you don't agree with these spiritual teachers who have been meditating for years and continue to do so? You think that they should be moved past that?
Well, one of the ways that Buddha talked about this is as an undistracted non-meditation. So undistracted, so you're not fixating, and it's a non-meditation because you're not meditating. It's just an undistracted, perpetual, thought-free wakefulness. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Okay. Yeah.
I love it. All right, so we've got two people here who are very, they seem to be open to engaging with each other very well, not being very confrontational, obviously we just had 2 questions already. They're not being very, I don't know what the word is, but you saw me shaking my head when he asked the question. I would just say, no, that's crazy. You don't want to be bad. You don't want to like bash people who meditate, and they're probably doing the same thing that I'm doing, but they're expressing it in a slightly different way. That's not what I said. So I would be a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, rejective or reactive or something like that, where I would be saying no to the answer to the question, because Curt from there tried to extrapolate a little bit more than Atlas was attempting to imply with his answer, non-answer.
Yeah, so I feel like when when you're not going straight to the end goal of thought-free wakefulness, then you're almost perpetuating yourself to need to sit on the cushion more and more. So work your way into a place where you can experience a contemplative fitness AI that's basically running in the background, where just nothing can trigger you, nothing can, but we're always working on basically deconditioning ourselves. That's what the art is, in many ways. Yeah.
Okay. Forgive my pettifogging nature, but what do you mean by contemplative fitness AI? What's meant by the word fitness in there?
Curt.
I love it. So, okay, again, interview. Atlas is the way interviewing Curt. And already, Atlas is saying so much weird stuff. He's going to be saying lots of random phrases. Curt is going to ask for a little bit of clarification. But that's not where Atlas is coming from. He's giving these impressions. He's using the language to give you an impression of understanding what it means, not to give you some specific whatever. But Curt wants something specific. So what does it mean to have in the background running a contemplative fitness AI? What does that mean? Does anybody want to guess if Atlas will answer this question directly? I haven't seen it. I don't. Well, let's find out.
He's already taken the interview over. I love you.
True. He can't help himself, man. He's an interviewer.
Oh, well, just for the audience.
Yes.
I don't know how many people are watching, but for the people who are watching, I'm much more comfortable as an interviewer than an interviewee. I feel like my predominant position on most topics is just I don't know. I'm decerebrate in most places, and that includes math and physics, which is my background. So I don't know. I imagine that much of what you'll get is extreme uncertainty and dubiousness from myself.
Very good.
You know what's fast?
I love it. Oh, okay. I guess the question is completely lost there. This is like Curt is a very good interviewer. I really like his interview style. And there's another interviewer. This is kind of tangential and pretty much not related at all, but I'm going on Atlas wavelength at the moment. So there's another interviewer named Guru Viking, and he's so good. And he has the same type of tendency. And also Daniel Ingram, he's another person. He's not an interviewer, but he has the same, they all have this sort of same tendency. When they're being interviewed, they kind of do the Uno reverse card and start asking a lot of questions. And it's fascinating to see. And I love it. And they're just such curious people. And they just kind of want to know and like really understand who they're talking with. It's a beautiful thing. Maybe that's a quality I wish I had, but I'm not as curious as these folks are. And man, it's so good. So we love to see it. Maybe we can learn how to develop that too.
And we can put a little flag in the fitness, in contemplative fitness AI, and potentially circle back to that because cool. Because I feel like where Curt and I have so much overlap, because this will probably end up being more of a conversation. Good. Is that since 2017, I had this list of all of these insanely thought-provoking questions about the nature of reality. And then the number one thing that came up was, how do I go and ask the smartest people that I have access to all of these thought-provoking questions about what the nature of reality is? And in a sense, would you say that that's what you're doing?
What I'm trying to do is understand the landscape of theories of everything, which involves speaking to some experts. In some sense, the idea behind a theory of everything is synonymous with what is the nature of reality. So in that respect, yes. Although I'm not particularly focused on speaking to people like these cognoscentes, I'm mainly interested in the theories, and they're an avenue to not only an income source of mine. So there's obviously a monetary element to it, though in the beginning there's nothing, and even still, it's not like it's paying all the bills. But there's obviously that. There's obviously some making a name for myself, but there's also there's so many questions I have, and I wanted to title the YouTube channel Office Hours because I come from an academic background. And in academia, what you have are office hours. A professor sets, let's say, Wednesdays from 4 to 8, and you can go talk to them about your homework, about whatever questions come to mind. So for me, I treat it more like office hours. Office hours that I film, and that's the predominant quality.
I love the extra nuance there. Interesting. Okay, I like that. Maybe they do have a very similar type of communication style, in that they're both going to be very verbose, potentially. It would seem like in this instance, with Curt getting asked the question, he becomes very verbose also. And it's weird, though. Maybe this could be my own bias. I'm not entirely sure. But it seems that I'm taking Curt's verbosity to indicate an added nuance, whereas I was thinking of Atlas's verbosity as not directly answering the question, which it seemed to be very different. So I'm going to have to watch that myself and make sure I'm not being overly critical or charitable to one side over the other. So I want to be careful with that. But interesting. Okay. More like office hours. Not really interested in the people. I'm interested in the theories of everything, and they kind of happen to have to come from conscious entities at the moment. So that is my interest in interviewing people. Okay.
So there's both this theories of everything that end up being a landscape of how self-awareness perceives the nature of its reality, and then creating some sort of a map about what is in that landscape across the planet of what people think the point of all of this is. And then another part of it is, it's like office hours regarding getting these brilliant people on and then having them answer these questions that are not only about adding them to this theories of everything landscape map, but also about poking and prodding and getting new insights. One of the most important things that I've noticed from the guests that come on the show is, and you've actually filmed this and included them in your intro several times, is when your guests have said, you know, Curt, this has been one of my best interviews. And that's because of your poking and prodding and enabling. It's like tennis, where you're enabling them to further increase their insights around their own ideas.
I love it. I love how thoughtful both of these guys are. Atlas is a person he's a very smart person. He's a very thoughtful person. He does lots of things on this channel. Man, it's so good. I'm singing his praises at the moment, but I don't know if I will be throughout this whole video. I really love how thoughtful they both are, and they're both really absorbing the other things that both people are saying. And he just said it's like tennis, which is interesting enough. But you can understand that he's really trying to absorb what Curt is saying and regurgitate it in his own language, which is a good way of really developing his own understanding here.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's a huge compliment. Like I do my best to prepare. I prepare like mad, like you wouldn't believe. Like it drains me how much I prepare. So when they say that it shows, which I'm always insecure about if any of it shows, not that I'm trying to have it show, but it would be great if even a modicum of it showed. It's great that some of that's exuded and that they acknowledge it.
Yeah, well, hopefully, Curt, you're taking good care of yourself too, because it's also important for you to be like healthy. And I hope that if you were to not go too mad and compromise all the other aspects of your life and development, hopefully if you don't overstep in those boundaries in those areas, you could also be more sharp when you interview people and more aware and well, whatever. It's a minor sort of unsolicited advice. It seems like you're doing very well, so I'm happy to hear that. Please make sure you don't burn yourself out and go overboard, because we like to see people healthy. At least I personally like to see people healthy and happy. So the theories of everything are very nice, and the interviews are very good, and I like to see the amount of work that you put into it. But I also want to see you as an individual be happy and healthy. So, from a random person.
Your essence reminds me a little bit of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, I get that. I used to get that more. One of the
Is that a good thing? Jordan Peterson
reasons
thinks way too much. He's so
seems to be that I'm extremely careful with what I say.
yeah, and that could be to the detriment also sometimes, right? Jordan Peterson is like really, 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 really putting all of his energy in every single sentence. Sometimes maybe these are older Jordan Peterson, older Curt too, apparently. I don't know if that's always healthy, man.
I'm trying to make sure that what I'm saying is my own word and that it's not.
See, look at that struggle.
That it's not unfairly adopted from someone else without my conscious effort,
But
trying to make it my own.
that struggle is a blessing and a curse, right? I feel like I'm commenting too much already. It's still a blessing and a curse, right? It's a good thing to be very thoughtful, but sometimes it can go too far. Okay, I'm gonna try to watch this by watching and not talking.
And then another reason is obvious, is that I've watched plenty of him and I don't know how to stop someone that I've seen from influencing my life on a micro level, for example.
That's super important. Okay. I know I just said I was gonna watch by watching, but I just want to emphasize that point. When we watch a lot of something, it gets into us, right? We get influenced by it on a micro level, is how he's phrasing it, right? We start to pick up the habits of the people that we watch or the media that we intake. We capture those influences and they influence us. So we do want to be careful to make sure that we have a good media diet and a good social diet so that we do not get so strongly influenced by such negative characteristics that you can see on certain media and exuded in certain people. Surely you know of a person or two that has a bad quality. Maybe it would be best for us to be aware of that and potentially curate a more healthy diet of media and social intake.
There's also Tony Robbins in me because I used to watch plenty of Tony Robbins. When I did stand up, it was like Seinfeld and Colin Quinn, because those are my favorite ones. And it's not like I'm trying to copy them. It's just that there's no way for me to export them completely.
Interesting. You did stand up.
And this might be quite specific to today's interaction. I've noticed it a little bit across your other interviews, but I've also noticed different emanations of what your unique expression is. But there seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, or just expand on this for us, but have you felt sort of your own sense of identity burst outside of your skin?
Yeah.
Yeah, and walk us through that. Yeah.
It
What does that
usually
mean?
happens around the 1 hour mark in an interview. It's mainly when I get comfortable with myself. So right now,
Beautiful.
I'm somewhat habitudinous because I haven't slept for. Well, I have slept, but I have slept poorly for the past 5 days or so.
There you go. That's exactly what we want to make sure is not happening, right? A person, well, he obviously knows it because he's referring to it right now, but you feel better when you're not sleepy. Sometimes it has to be said because it's not so explicit. We kind of know it, but we don't explicitly know it. You feel better when you're not sleepy. Being sleepy kind of sucks, and it makes everything worse. It makes your processing much worse in all domains. So maybe try to take care of your sleep and make sure that you're not overworking or overplaying or overdoing anything in such a way that it interrupts your sleep. Because if you're sleeping well, then everything downstream of that will be better. Broad general statement. I stick to it though. Everything will be better if you sleep well.
And usually once I'm in the flow, that's when it comes out. Not that I'm not in the flow, man. Like, I respect and love you. It just takes a while.
Yeah, of course.
And I just came off from a previous podcast, so that one somewhat exhausted me. And I have another one right after this. And then I got to like sleep in a river of opium. Not this is a joke, but like just like completely bathe myself in silk and satin and just go to sleep for like 12 hours.
That's not how it works, Curt.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we were talking about before we went on, was just respectfully rejuvenating yourself for being able to actually actualize this channel at its fullest potential, because sometimes what we think is doing all of the sessions, and this was my case also, especially in 2018 and 2019, was doing even at these conferences like 10 shows in a day, like 10 1 to 2 hour shows in a day.
Wow.
And that was fucking crazy. And that type of energy is cool and it has its place, but but there's also the energy for the rejuvenation.
Anybody feeling empathetic phlegm? Happens a lot to me. I got it right now. Empathetic phlegm. Hope you feel it too.
But just to play on this question a little bit more, you know, you've had people like Rupert Spira on the show, and you've had these more mystically literate via direct experience when people like Rupert tell you that you are God. You've just forgotten that you are God. Does that resonate with you?
It does in some sense, and it doesn't in another. So I think if I had that realization, it would rock me to my core. In some sense, I can intellectually understand
Who
it.
told you that?
But that's the issue. That's another reason why.
Okay, let's play on this a little bit. So you have awareness, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So would you say that the mind is kind of like magic?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Like, are you blown away by the fact that you have the power to know?
Doesn't seem like it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
but just stay with that feeling a little bit more, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Where is this going?
We'll see. So this power to know, a quality that's enabling your perception right now. Would you say that it's possible that we're habitually overlooking the profundity of consciousness?
You know, there's something Wittgenstein said, and I know I quote him perhaps a bit too much, but he had something called clarificatory remarks, which are those aspects of reality that are most important but hidden because of their simplicity and familiarity.
Exactly.
Wittgenstein gets taken as the paragon of a rational atheist, but actually he was profoundly, deeply religious, and many people don't realize that. The reason why he didn't speak much about religion was because he had a quote which said, of what one cannot speak of precisely, one must be silent. And he had extreme religious veneration as he got older, to the point where I think his close friend Norman Malcolm said that the religiosity that characterized Wittgenstein was greater than that of people who consider themselves to be religious.
Very good. Wittgenstein likes this idea of fideism, which I don't know if he coined it or if he used it. I don't even know if he used it. The idea is that reason and faith are different processes. They're very different processes. So he didn't want to go through this nonsense isn't even the right word, but he didn't want to go through this inappropriate usage of reason to evaluate his faith. I'm being very loose with my terminology here. I don't know if this directly applies, if the way that I'm expressing it directly applies to how Wittgenstein is using it, but they are different processes. So you don't reason out your faith and you don't faith out your reason. You don't need to do that, and you don't want to build up this habitual attempt to use the wrong style of engagement to engage with the wrong things. So he doesn't want to bring in his rational mind to do his faith things. And that translates to him not talking a lot about his faith, which I think is something that we can hopefully appreciate and try to develop in ourselves. Not necessarily for faith, because I'm not a religious person. I really don't care about that kind of stuff. But more broadly, for other things, if you care a lot about, if you like to engage in ways such as in ways that are more social, you may want to see beyond the sort of habit of intellectualizing your socializing. Maybe if you want to engage in ways that are emotional and like become emotionally aware, you want to try to engage with your emotions in ways that aren't being clouded by your emotion, by your rationalization or your thinking about it too much. If you want to engage with beauty and aesthetics, you may want to try to engage with that without pulling in your rational, intellectual mind, right? Because you want to have this separation. It doesn't mean you always need to do it in the way that Wittgenstein seemed to have been a little bit more consistent with it, but to understand that the way that we talk about these other forms of engagement, the way that we talk about our emotions and the way that we talk about religion or spirituality and the way that you talk about art and beauty are going to be very imprecise because it's not the right language. Generally, we're not using the right language game to speak in those ways of engagement, to speak those ways of engaging. So don't speak, or create your own language. Maybe that's another alternative. And, you know, sometimes you can speak it and get, as long as it doesn't block you from it, understand that there's a separation and try to see beyond our own intellectualization of these other fields of engagement.
Beautiful. So you resonate with the notion that we might be perpetually, habitually overlooking what is so profound, which is the fact that we have the quality of the power to know, consciousness.
Well, I don't know if that's what's the most profound. I know it's somewhat profound. I don't know if it's the most. So there's another quote.
Somewhat profound.
There's a great idea from one of. There's a great idea that the kingdom of God lays before men, but men do not see it.
Yes. Yes. See, you remind me, and I mentioned this to you, but you remind me so much of me, especially like right before like 6 months ago, where like this realization, Rupert was one of the most important people in catalyzing this realization. Basically what I see you doing, which is what I was doing, which is the eyeballs are faced outward and they're scraping the landscape of the nature of reality, looking for who are the people that know the most physics and that know the most math and that know the most about these different fields, neuroscience, philosophy. How can I sponge in what the peaks of these landscapes know and, take in all this information and refract it uniquely into a theory of everything? Well, you may not be doing that last part necessarily, but it does feel like you are to an extent. But then what the key switch is when rather than the eyeballs being protruded outward, trying to find the nature of reality, the eyeball turns on itself.
Have you played Bloodborne?
Wait, what is this?
Have you played Bloodborne? Okay. It's a Hidetaka Miyazaki game. Oh, Dark Souls. Have you heard of Dark Souls?
Oh, Dark Souls. Yes.
They had a game called Bloodborne, and in it, the characters who had true insight they would turn their eyes inside out and put many eyes pointed toward the end.
Curt, you have the answer. It's right under your nose. You're pointing to it in different ways, from Wittgenstein to this Dark Souls. You're pointing at it in so many different ways. Truly, you are. You know that this is it.
Souls. Yeah. Well, what's the answer?
You are it. You are it.
Okay, I don't understand what that means, Alan.
Okay, beautiful. What is the answer? Okay, Atlas is saying, Curt, you have the answer under your nose already. Atlas is asking, Curt is asking, what the heck is the answer? What is it? And Atlas is just saying, well, you are it. So this is a giant mismatch. And this, to me, personally, comes off very strangely. It seems actually kind of concerning. No, not to be offensive or to be weird or mean or anything about that, but it seems very strange because they're talking to each other, and Atlas seems to understand where Curt is coming from because Atlas presumably was there 6 months ago, or he's been doing this sort of spiritual stuff for a little bit longer than that even. So he should have an understanding of how to speak with a person who is like a normal person. And he should probably even have an understanding of how to speak to a person who is like intellectually developed very strongly. So he should know that what he's saying is not going to land. And it just sounds very strange because that's not how you engage with a normal person. When Curt is asking for the answer and Atlas just says, this is it, or you are already the it, that isn't going to answer the question. That's not going to be a satisfying answer in any way for Curt. So I don't know if that maybe there is some merit to just hammering the point home and trying to make Curt change his form of engagement by sticking strongly to the engagement that he is in, that Atlas is in already, and just trying to teach by staying in that engagement and not really lending a helping hand by going over and trying to be intellectually rigorous and trying to give an intellectual explanation to bring him along the ride and build him up towards the sort of area that Atlas is at. It comes as just so strange to me to watch that sort of thing happen. What is the answer? You are it. And he knows it's not going to work. So very concerning to me to see that type of behavior. And, well, let's see how it plays. I'm not sure.
Like you are the nature of reality. Like you are the highest.
Okay, now what does that mean? Because I imagine if one is saying you, referring to me, then one can say that you referring to anyone, and thus it's all the highest, which also means it's all the lowest, which means it's all the same, which is the same as non-dualism.
Yep.
Which to me, I don't see how I have quite a few problems with non-dualism, though I skirt with it. One of them is I don't see it as anything. I don't see how it's not veiled nihilism.
I would say it is.
Let's play with direct
I would say it is. That's just me, though. Hopefully it doesn't have any extra implications along with that. But hey, man, just take it as veiled nihilism. I mean, it certainly is. It doesn't need to be veiled at all. It's nihilism. In a certain way, it certainly is.
experience a little bit more. So you're conscious, and that, would you say that consciousness is formless? Would you say that the quality of the power to know, you know how water is wet, and like wetness is like a quality.
Okay.
Wetness is like a formless quality.
Sure.
Okay.
In a sense.
Okay. And then like kind of like sweetness, right? Sweetness is like
a property. One can say it's a property or no?
Let's play with quality for now.
Okay.
Quality. And so now you have the power to know, which is also like a formless quality. Okay. So rather than the fixation externally on form, name, and shape, the eyeball has turned inward on itself and is now recognizing that this consciousness, awareness, the power to know is something so profound and so indescribable, so formless that it's been overlooking. And now what you see is, Curt, might it be possible that if you look at consciousness without any attributes, so what does it look like to be consciousness without the costume of Curt, or consciousness without the costume of Rupert, or without the costume of Atlas?
I understand.
Oh, that does make sense. Yes. Okay. So now you see that consciousness without its costumes. So when you look at it most upstream as just the formless power to know, that is what people are pointing at for the last millennia when they talk about the kingdom of God is within you. That this is the highest, the absolute, appearing for an exploration of infinite possibility.
I understand.
Okay. And so what holds you back? Is it like logic and reasoning, or what is the thing that kind of like holds you back from recognizing that this is the highest, coming to explore a possibility of infinity?
Well, you said earlier, it's not, it's the highest, but if everything is the highest, then it's also the lowest. And well, another way would be putting it, the way I would put it, in a more intellectual sense, so they can be actually explained slightly better than just saying everything is the highest. It's inappropriate to evaluate the hierarchy here because it's beyond whatever hierarchy or whatever level of evaluation. It's not the appropriate way of engaging with it to call it highest or lowest or whatever. And it's just a tick in expression to kind of make it sound okay for some people in some instances. It's not the highest. There's no hierarchy. There's no comparison. It's just what it is, right? That's one way of putting it. So that would be a part of the blockage. Blockage here. What's blocking you from understanding? That's part of the blockage here. It's not well explained to the intellectual mind. And I don't think that Curt is in an area where he's being overly intellectual in such a way that's destructive or averse to developing in other forms, right? So the type of intellectualism that we like to sometimes attack or call out and say it's wrong and say bad and, you know, whatever on the stream is when, and not only for intellectualism, any other form of development, but we'll stick to intellectualism for the moment. When there's a person who is in this form of logic and reasoning and intellectualizing, and they feel, and they say, and they think that that is the only valuable or useful or valid form of development or valid form of engagement, however you want to put it. Engagement, development, I think both would work. And when they do this, they dismiss and neglect all other forms of engagement. So a person, to give a hypothetical sort of meme type of example, if a person is very, very smart, they're an intellectual kind of guy, and they don't think that they need to care about their sleep. Okay, just to make a relevant point. But that's not the meme example. The meme example would be like, the meme, it would be like a person who's very smart, but they don't care about their health generally, so they may become overweight, or they don't work out, or they don't care about social interactions, so they don't actually engage with normal people socially, and they don't really build up relationships. They don't really care about their emotions, and they become very emotionally unaware. This kind of person who is thinking that only the intellectualism matters, and they say that all the other stuff is stupid. It's dumb to be vain and care about your looks, or it's dumb to be vain and care about your health, you know, something like this. This is a bad thing. This is bad. Don't do this. No, 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 no. You don't want to get one form of development and neglect other forms of development. That would be bad. And the same thing happens for religious people. Person who's religious or spiritual or whatever, they may come into this sort of weirdo religious kind of things. God is everywhere, and God is love. Yes, yes, yes. And then they think that that means that they need to neglect developing their intellect or their logical development, right? And they call all that stuff cold, heartless, devilish sometimes, something like that. This is a problem. When you start to neglect other forms of development, that is a problem. Don't do that. At least that's what I like to encourage. I like to encourage this flexibility, this openness, and understanding that other forms can be developed. Not necessarily that you need to develop everything equally. Not necessarily that you need to develop everything today, right now, currently. Just understanding that there is a possibility for other things to be developed. Now, it seems like Curt understands this very well. He seems to have this openness and understanding that he can develop spirituality. And it would be nice to see people working with that, right? You can leverage his intellectual understanding to help him out a little bit and help him drop the intellectualizing and go into this sort of spiritual way of engaging. But that needs to be expressed to him so that he can understand that he needs to do that, as opposed to just telling him that you're already done and what is it that's blocking you from being here. You know, there are better ways to help people understand something when they are very good at understanding and they're open to the spirituality, I think. That's just me thinking, though. I'm not entirely sure. So we want to be aware of that.
I said, if it's the highest, it's also the lowest.
Yes.
And so does one want to say that?
You can say it.
That this is the lowest? And if one is not going to say it's the lowest, then why is it high and not low?
I would say it freely. Just say it. It's the lowest. It's the worst. It's the most evil. It's not the appropriate way of saying it. So when you say it's the highest, it's sort of metaphorical because you're using the language from a different type of engagement to talk about the thing that you're talking about. Now, it'd be like if you're talking about, what could I say? Where could you use this? If you're talking about dance and you call it melodic, would anybody ever do that? I don't think so. Let me think about this. If somebody is talking about music and they call it sweet, I think that's a good way of doing it, right? Because sweet is good in terms of taste pleasures. Sweet is good in terms of food, right? But music is good in terms of music. But sometimes we don't have the language for saying good music or valuable music or effective music or valid music. So we just use the language. I just did it right there to call it good, which would be like a moral term. We can use the moral term to apply to music. It's not really the right term. We can use the food terms to apply to music. Oh, it's very sweet. It's an effective way of doing it. Or it's smooth, which is a sort of kinesthetic. Kinesthetic? That's not kinesthetic. It's a Is that kinesthetic? It's a kinesthetic phrase. It's something that's good, valid, kinesthetically. And we apply that to music. So we're using these sort of metaphors to apply to positive engagement in one form. And it's not really even positive when we start getting into some types of the spirituality where positive and negative don't really apply. Whatever. Doesn't make a difference. It's a valid, just a phrase to express the validity of a particular type of engagement and a particular type of evaluation within that type of engagement. So there's no real language that has been developed to express the valid type of spiritual engagement, the evaluations that would be made in the spiritual level, which would make something valid. There's no language for that. And of course, a lot of people would even be upset with me describing it in that way, because obviously when you're in that form of engagement, it's not actually a form of engagement. It's not actually a form of evaluation. You don't really make something valid or invalid. Okay. It's all metaphor here. Because we're speaking in an intellectual level, so we're trying to understand it. When you're speaking from the intellectual level and you're talking about these spiritual forms of engagement and trying to express something valid, we may say things like good. We may say things like positive. We may say things like sweet. We may say things like beautiful. It's none of those things. You can just as easily say the opposite. You can just as easily say it's bad, it's ugly, it's bitter. You can say all these other negative things about it. It doesn't make a difference. It's all valid. It's all valid in the spiritual realm. That's what you learn. So you could just as easily say negative things. It's the lowest. I think that's a very easy bullet to bite. Though I expressed it in a very long-winded way.
No, it's beautiful. So we see that today when we look at people not having their basic needs being met, and where we have war, and where we have famine, and where we have all of the worst catastrophic issues, they're happening here on the same planet that the absolute most ecstatic God realization is happening. So it's all happening here. This is all it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're not necessarily even trying to create a juxtaposition.
Hold on. You're cutting off, and I want to make sure I'm hearing every single word. Do you mind repeating it?
Yeah, of course. So we see this manifestation of play, like what we're talking about, is both.
Hold on. We're seeing the manifestation of play. Okay.
Yes. And then that it's both exploring the archetypal hell at the same time as there's the exploration of the archetypal heaven.
Hold on, Alan, please. I want to make sure. Can you double check if the chat can hear you, or if it's just me that's cutting?
We can hear.
Hearing you cut in and out.
We can hear you. We can hear Atlas very well. We can hear Curt too.
Watching. Can you hear Alan completely and clearly without break?
Oh, we love you, Brando. Thanks for your love.
Yes, I can hear. I can hear him too.
Okay, so it's just myself.
People in chat say they can hear.
All right. Well, sorry. Continue.
Okay. Well, let's see if. Can you hear me now, Curt?
I think that is my headphones. I apologize, man. Let me just.
No worries. We're going through all of the lovely. We love you guys. Thank you for your love.
Okay, we're back.
Also, maybe that I have OBS running in the background. Sometimes that messes it up. Okay, do you mind speaking? Hello.
Yes, hey. We are testing. Okay. Testing for Curt.
Yeah.
We're testing for Curt. Say something, man. Say something. The Tao that can be known is not the eternal Tao. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal name. Just say something.
You guys are so kind. Look at all these lovely comments.
Two awesome minds coming together.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. All right. Let's get back to this. So you were saying.
Okay, cool. Do you see all these lovely comments, Curt? We
Yeah,
have
I
a lot
just,
of.
man, they're only positive. It's just plaudits, and I appreciate it.
Well, because people love your channel and
It's a
they
good
love
channel.
what we've been doing on ours as well. And
Man, Kurt's channel is a very good channel. Atlas's channel is also a very good channel. I like Atlas's channel. Kurt's channel is a very good channel. I would highly recommend it.
so it's a beautiful colliding, and cool. So did you hear that last sentence pretty clearly?
No.
Oh, you still didn't?
No, repeat it, please.
Oh, I mean the very recent one that I just said.
Yes.
Like,
All this
okay.
is clear. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so that if we play from the perspective of an infinite amount of possibility, and we are that which explores that infinite possibility. Okay. And so then we use these realities and consciousness as the mechanism to explore infinite potential. Are you still following?
That's his thinking first.
And that these realities have the archetype that you just described, which is the absolute hellishness as well as the absolute heaven simultaneously. So you have tanks and murder and hanging people and famine at the same time that you have ecstasy and yachts and jetpacks and Thanksgiving dinners.
What privilege is one over the other?
What privileges one over the other, meaning
Which makes
like
one positive.
why would you get to do one of those and somebody else does another one?
Why do you care about the good one, right? The one that's traditionally seen as good. Let's say in our culture, we think that the yachts are fun and we think that dying in poverty is bad. So from the worldview of your non-dualism, or your Advaita, from your spiritual perspective, what makes one of these absolutely good and the other one absolutely bad? What privilege is one over the other? Why would you want to go towards this sort of ecstatic, blissful state in meditation as opposed to going towards a sort of lustful, angered state, murdering people? What makes you choose one over the other?
Like why
Why
would
should one be pursued and the other not? So why should one not go around raping and pillaging and murdering and tormenting and causing anguish on a local or global level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you intrinsically, you know the answer to that question. Like every one of us.
So, a very basic type of question with a very non-answer. You already know. This, to me, again, is concerning. He's asking the question because he doesn't know. He wants to understand how it works in your worldview. He's not a part of your worldview. He doesn't have your worldview at the moment. So why is it in your worldview that one is good and the other is bad? If the answer is just, we assume it's just an unchecked assumption that you just kind of know, well, okay, that's interesting. But if you can't espouse your worldview, then why are you trying to give it to me? And I remember, so when I watched this, I was a little confused because I didn't understand the framing of it, the conversation. And now watching from the beginning, I don't know how far, I think we're about halfway. No, we're only 20 minutes in. So watching from the beginning, we still didn't really get much framing of the conversation, which is very interesting. So like, it's not very clear who is doing what and why, who is trying to spread what theory, who is trying to share what philosophy and worldview. That seems to me to be extremely important to understand how a person should be engaging in a sort of normal social setting in terms of actually trying to either change minds, if you're trying to help share some information with somebody and help them understand your worldview, you would need to change how you speak about some things, for most cases. And potentially, if there's an opposite situation, just for example, be more specific. If Atlas is trying to help Curt awaken to the true nature of reality, Atlas would have to express himself better so that Curt can understand. If Curt is trying to understand Atlas would have to stick with his own personal language, and Curt would have to be a little bit more flexible to understand what Atlas is saying. You get where I'm going from here? So it depends on sort of who is trying to change or who is trying to learn to kind of evaluate how weird this situation is. But the beginning of the conversation didn't quite, there's no framing here. It's not really clear who's doing what. It's kind of back and forth. So it makes it a little bit muddied. And I guess just from my external perspective, watching it from this vantage point, it just seems a little strange the way that Atlas is answering these questions. But okay, you already know. How do we know which things are good and which things to be pursued? Well, you already know. Okay, well, the next point, of course, I'm sure what Curt would be saying is that, well, yes, some people know these things, and we have evidence of other people out in the world who are murderers or who are other bad things that we think of traditionally as bad. They develop those things, and they seem very comfortable doing it, mostly because they're doing it. So is that a problem? Is there anything wrong with what they're doing? Should we accept them for developing in those ways separate from the way that you're developing in your spiritual way? Or is it acceptable for a person to want to go out and kill people? Is that acceptable? That seems to be the type of question that Curt would want to throw back and put a little pushback. Because you can't just, well, you could just say you kind of already know, but some people know and they have different conclusions. So how do we adjudicate those?
Intrinsically knows the answer to that question, because if you go back to what we've started with, which was that we share the power to know, we share consciousness, we share that same, if you get there, what happens is, and you can also see that externally, you're like, yeah, all the species share the same planet. So you can also see it externally at the same time, that you recognize that you actually create harm to yourself, to your own home, when you rape and pillage and do any of those horrible negative activities.
Horrible.
But that's part of the exploration.
Negative.
It's part of the play. But so the more that you get the most metaphysical level, like you just had Chris Langan on the show. We were talking about that a little bit before we started. But when you take it from the most metaphysical level, which is out of an infinite amount of possibility, because when you truly grok infinity, you begin recognizing that an infinite amount of possibility, you can never come to the end of exploring. And this is basically what Kurt Gödel and Douglas Hofstadter and Donald Hoffman are talking about as well, is that you can't actually come to the truth that you are a PlayStation 5 playing infinite games, but you can't come to that truth from within Grand Theft Auto. So you're trying to find the truth that you're in PlayStation 5 playing infinite games, but you're trying to find it from within GTA.
Okay, I like the, again, we're getting more metaphorical things. Is kind of, these are kind of things that may be helpful for some people. Certainly, it seems like it may have been helpful for Atlas, these types of analogies with video games and understanding. You can't know the reality outside of the video game from within the video game, so you got to escape the video game, and you do that with your mind. We can understand that, and we like that sort of thing. It's kind of fun, but we're trying to get Curt here is asking for some sort of rigorous understanding and fleshed out worldview that Atlas has, or that the non-dualist may have, and he wants to understand it. Talking about video games isn't helping understand it.
Okay, so when people bring up Kurt Gödel, I I want to know what's the relationship between a first order language and our physical reality or this reality.
I love this so much. This is so good. When people bring up Kurt Gödel, I want to know about how first order languages are related to physical reality. Of course, first order languages, I'm saying, of course, I don't know this stuff. First order languages being like math, logic, whatever, these things, which Gödel's incompleteness theory are saying cannot fully justify themselves, but it only applies to first order languages, not to just everything. It doesn't apply to everything. So, unless you can show that somehow reality is a first order language, or if you even understand that there's a distinction here between different forms of expressions of something, then you can start to evoke Kurt Gödel. If you don't have any understanding, if you're not at all advanced in mathematics, you probably shouldn't be talking about Kurt Gödel and his incompleteness theorem. I am a kind of person who doesn't know anything about Gödel or incompleteness theorems or mathematics. I do not like when people use science or mathematics or any of these, even philosophy, normal philosophy things, to try to justify their spirituality. It is something different. Don't use the wrong style of engagement to justify or evaluate things that aren't under the purview of that type of engagement. It's like going to a football game and trying to evaluate it using the rules of basketball. It doesn't work. You don't do that. So don't come to spirituality with the rules of mathematics and try to apply mathematical laws or rules or principles or theorems. Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Don't try to use theorems from mathematics to apply to reality, whatever you think reality is, physical reality. So physical reality specifically. It doesn't seem to be appropriate to do that. In the same way, it doesn't seem appropriate to try to evaluate the rules to evaluate a game of football using the rules of basketball. Everyone's traveling. Yeah, that's what happens when you play football. You don't bounce. Very important.
Because what Kurt Gödel was saying was extremely specific. It was with any axiomatic system strong enough to produce some qualities like arithmetic and so on. So what's the relationship between that? What's to say that reality has anything to do with that? It also is an extremely computational view of reality, and I don't think reality is necessarily computational. That's Penrose's entire argument, is that.
Okay, let's substitute the word computational with comprehensive. Are you comprehending reality right now?
So again, like a complete mismatch. Atlas just brought up Kurt Gödel. Kurt asked how that's related to anything, and Atlas is just coming to like something completely different. So it's another just kind of abandoning that line of thought and trying to bring up something different. And I don't know if I don't think he's sort of consciously doing this type of thing and trying to dodge the question, but that doesn't sit right with me when I'm watching this. And he's bringing up these random concepts that, when slightly challenged, are just abandoned and moved on to something new. That doesn't sit right with me.
If what you mean is, do I comprehend some aspects of reality, like in my understanding? Well, I would say I think I understand some things. Though
Is the fundamental nature of consciousness to comprehend?
No. Why?
Why?
You think it is?
I like this. So we've got a couple times why Kurt asks why here, like why are you asking this question? So Kurt is asking Atlas, why are you asking this question? He's not saying it in that way. He's being a lot nicer than the way that I'm coming off from pausing and saying it and sort of taking things apart here. But Kurt is asking why is that relevant? He asked earlier, he didn't say why is that relevant earlier. He just asked why here, and earlier he asked where's this going? So when Atlas was trying to have him contemplate reality or something. I don't exactly remember what was going. He was going down the Rupert Spira type track. Feel the awareness everywhere. And Kurt's like, where's this going? Is there a directionality to this? Do you have a goal? Do you have a point? Can we express that in front so that we understand, so we're on the same page? And here again, Atlas is asking this question. Okay, why is that relevant to what we're talking about? We had like a particular line of thought. Curt asked a specific question, and now I'm not sure if you're dodging or if you're just weaving a very complicated answer, which is going to be very satisfying. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. Is that relevant? Why is it relevant? Why are you asking?
I would say the fundamental quality of consciousness is awareness, but that also is just a tautology, because it seems like you're substituting one word for a synonym.
So then would the fundamental nature of awareness be to comprehend?
Okay, you have to explain to me what you mean by comprehend.
You see, this is where I'm saying there's like a bit of that, like when you sort of like relax. I know.
I'm not being antagonistic in the least, Alan.
I know. I love you. I sense this though.
This is also very like, so the shocking type of mismatch that I'm perceiving here is very concerning to me. But also Curt, he is not at all being antagonistic. He's saying it right. He just said it right there. He's not being antagonistic. He doesn't seem like he's trying to like take down any sort of worldview. It doesn't seem like he's being malicious in any way. He's not even addressing the sort of way that Atlas is sort of changing positions a little bit and not following the lines of dialogue clearly or directly. He's not like trying to hold his feet to the fire or anything like that. So man, it's really heartwarming the way that Curt is, I don't want to say allowing, what do I want to say here? He's kind of just rolling with however Atlas is presenting himself and presenting his position. Not too much challenge, but he's got questions and he wants to understand a little bit. So Curt is probing and prodding, but when Atlas kind of goes off on some different realm, well, kind of want to understand what he means, but okay, if that's what you're doing, then we'll just allow that strand to stop, and we don't need to go down the rabbit hole, or we don't need to try to have you justify how physical reality is a first order language, and so on and so forth. So Curt is being very, very, very generous here and very kind, and he's extremely open, which is a very valuable quality, which I love to see, and I would love to develop myself. So just hammering that home and emphasizing that. It's beautiful.
I sense it in your essence. Like there's like this, like, give me this definition of comprehend, but I know intrinsically, like just like you said earlier, well, why wouldn't somebody just go and create violence and havoc?
So this would be offensive to me. And it's really like, look at Curt. He's not, he doesn't mind at all. But Atlas is restating Curt's position, but he's restating it with a little bit of a voice, right? With a little bit of a voice, which is a little bit exaggerated, which I'm also doing it here on the stream by myself, but I feel like maybe it's not appropriate for me to even do it on stream by myself, but I feel like I'm by myself. I'm not doing it directly to the person, so it's a little bit different. But Atlas is restating Curt's position, and he's putting it with a little emphasis. So he's making it out as if Curt were being antagonistic. Well, why don't you murder people in the streets? That's not how Curt asked the question at all. And then Atlas is on top of that saying, you already know the answer. This is extremely condescending. This is extremely disrespectful and completely missing the level of engagement that Curt is at. Curt is at a particular level, and he's expressing how he's engaging with the world very, very openly. He's being quite clear with how he likes to engage rigorously with this sort of intellectual mostly way, and he's open to other forms of engagement. But then Atlas is coming along and saying, you already know the answer. I know you know that. You already know the answer. You see, the answer is the pearl under your neck. And now, again, I don't think this is a major problem. I'm saying that it's shocking to me to see the mismatch. It is shocking to see the mismatch, but it's not like a huge problem. It can potentially lead to a bigger problem. Atlas doesn't seem like a bad kind of person, so he wouldn't be doing this type of thing, but this is like inching towards trying to gaslight people, it's not gaslighting necessarily. It could be gaslighting. So in one world, Atlas could be a person who is trying to undermine Curt's judgment of his own reality by telling him he already knows the answer. That's one world of understanding. And that in that world, it will be a sort of gaslighting activity. Another world is Atlas doesn't understand how other people engage with the world. So Atlas is in this new form of engagement with this sort of spiritual sort of being his main form of engagement. And he doesn't understand that other people can develop in other ways and those other ways are valid. And he doesn't know how to express himself in those other forms of engagement. He doesn't know how to speak the language of normal people. And that's also very concerning to me. So these are two negative worlds possible to be that we want to be vigilant of and make sure that hopefully we don't fall into that type of engagement in that negative sense. Now, also, there are lots of positive worlds that are possible. And I think that we're probably in currently where Atlas and Curt are engaging both positively. There's no ill will. There's no like malicious intent. There's no gaslighting. There's no brainwashing or being stuck in one form of engagement and not being able to express himself outwardly in other forms. I don't think we're necessarily in some negative world here, but we do want to be aware of those couple of possibilities of this type of behavior happening in really bad situations. And if we start to see this, it's concerning to me, and maybe it should be concerning to you too.
And the answer.
I'll object to that.
Okay.
Because there are obviously people who are driven by that, who think that that is the highest good. And the example that I give frequently is 1206 with Genghis Khan, where he said that the highest good is to put my enemies' heads on a stick and rape their women. And that was good to him. So it's not exactly obvious. And see, this is what I see the New Age community being driven by, this Pollyannic view of what humans are. But plenty of people are motivated by pointing down. They have a God and it's down. Mm-hmm. And I don't see the recognition of that in some of these non-dualist circles.
So how old is Genghis Khan again?
Oh no, how old is Genghis Khan? What does that matter? So Atlas, well, one way of engaging with how Curt just described that, which is seems like a very clear thing, that we've got Genghis Khan and we've got some other people who have developed very, very strongly in some sort of evil way, traditionally seen as evil way. And the New Age movement doesn't seem to be recognizing or even acknowledging that that's a possibility. You can just very simply say, yeah, it's a possibility. You can develop yourself very, very strongly in some evil way and still somehow get to the spiritual essence that we're trying to refer to. However, that's not our emphasis. We don't do that here. You can do that over there if you want to do that over there. You're probably going to get arrested because when you engage with spirituality, it doesn't separate you from the world. So you're probably going to get arrested over there, but you can still be like a super spiritual person and get arrested, and that's totally fine. You can be Genghis Khan and be spiritual. That's not what we do here. That's not how we teach it here. That's not our emphasis in our community. And you can just cleanly say that without really having any issue. I think we could say that. But it doesn't seem like Atlas is giving that type of answer. He's asking how old is Genghis Khan, so this may be relevant. I'm not sure how.
1,000 years old?
Almost. 1,200 approximately is when he had his reign in Asia.
Okay. So 1,000 years ago, where was our level of self-awareness compared to now? That's another way to view that question. Because if you look at the level of self-awareness 1,000 years ago, that was more of the essence, where you could sort of say that I want to put my enemies' heads on sticks and I want to rape the women. And to
Ooh, what development have we, self-awareness development here? Like, when was the teaching of Jesus and like Buddha and like the Taoists and the Hindus and all these other mystics that are lauded so much in these sort of spiritual communities? That was more than 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago for Buddha, I think, and earlier for the more Hindu traditions, and 2,000 years ago for Jesus. And I feel like that's not an acceptable answer, right? Our self-awareness has not radically changed, right? The teachings that we're giving now are not radically different from the teachings that were available at that point in time, which may suggest that the level of conscious development has not radically grown in such a way that people such as Genghis Khan or whoever else would have had the possibility of developing as much as Jesus or as much as Buddha or as much as any Hindu sadhu or whatever, or as much as any Taoist practitioner, sage or whatever. Right? These folks could have been developed much more than we are currently developed. So I'm not sure how that's a relevant answer at all.
today, in modernity, with 8 billion people and the internet and computers, and we see the planet as one organism, and we see these conscious agents, aka humans, as this shared computational or comprehensive unit that then is what is exploring. So in a sense, you can't get away with that anymore. Self-awareness has increased to the point where you can no longer get away with having this drastic level of malevolence and violence.
Why even call it malevolence? So we've got many layers of we've got many layers here. So is the spiritual teachings just at the whim of what is acceptable in our culture? Because it's not acceptable in our culture anymore to be so violent. We'll say violent here. Try to not have such a value judgment thrown in with malevolent. Is that the case? Is the spiritual teaching just kind of bound to wherever our culture is? And it was acceptable then and it's not acceptable now just because you would get arrested for it? Is that the direction that we're going here? Or is it actually malevolent and bad? And was it bad then and still bad now? And it's just bad then but acceptable, and bad now and still unacceptable. But in either case, it was malevolent and bad. So very tricky here when we get into the habit of using languages from differing systems of evaluating and engaging in the world, and we bring over all those words, right? And we bring over all these impressions from those words, and we bring over a little bit of the assumptions of those words, and we bring up a lot of the values that are hidden, and all the assumptions and such hidden with those alternate forms of engagement. So when he's talking about malevolence in spirituality, he's trying to push forward a spiritual worldview, and he's talking about malevolence. It seems as if he starts to bring along the baggage of the assumptions and the worldview of some moral worldview. In which case, what is that moral worldview and how is that justified? And if we don't have an answer for that, well, now we have this sort of unchecked worldview in the background that is just there, that's going to be building assumptions off of it, and it's unevaluated and unacknowledged, and that is very concerning for Curt, and he wants it to be expressed very clearly, but it isn't being expressed. So a lot of pushback going to happen here.
Okay. Well, what you're saying, man, it's so embedded in assumptions upon assumptions that so here's one. It's a highly contested issue whether or not we've progressed in any moral respect from 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. In some people would say we've lost our way, especially since Vervaeke would say since the invention of vowels, which sounds like it has absolutely nothing to do with this, but that was around the year 1200 as well, or at least the invention of literacy, which was around written word, which is
Curt.
3,000, I believe, minus.
Curt.
So, oh my goodness, that to me is extremely. It's just rude. I mean, it's not just rude. It's patronizing. It's rude. It's a little bit insensitive to the level of engagement that we're at, right? So again, we've got Atlas at a particular level of engagement. We've got Curt at a different level of engagement. And what just happened there was Curt was just explaining he's contesting the notion that we've grown significantly and we have better self-awareness in our modern society. So he's contesting that a little bit and then talking about some of the ways that we may have fallen off by different theories of literacy and vowels. I've never heard this from John Vervaeke. That sounds very interesting to me. But then Atlas interrupts him by saying Curt. I'm just saying his name. Curt. Stop. Curt. Reel it in, Curt. Bring it back. Remember, awareness. Are you aware? Are you aware right now, Curt? Are you aware? Stop with your thinking. Stop with your intellectualizing. Stop with Genghis Khan. Is Genghis Khan in the room right now? Awareness. Are you aware? You see how it's very patronizing here. And presumably Atlas can understand and know when he's getting an attack or a pushback on his position, to listen to that attack or pushback and then try to address it. And you can have this sort of debate or conversation and really, actually develop something there and not just be like patronizing and talk to Curt like he's a baby. Now, I don't know if you went that far, but this is kind of how it comes off when he's like, Curt. So we want to make sure that we're not going too far and patronizing people. And when there's this sort of mismatch, you want to be aware of that mismatch. And it seems that Atlas should be aware of it. So anyway, very concerning to me. This is very concerning to me. When I see this, it's extremely concerning.
If you can get to the understanding that this is the same intelligence talking to itself, can you get to that understanding?
The same intelligence. Look, you mentioned that you don't particularly like my persnickety adherence to detail, but the reason is that you mentioned Gödel. Well, why do you mention Gödel? See, this is what I see.
Back to Gödel.
And I don't mean this as any demeaning quality to the spiritual or New Age community. I just have no other word for that community than like that. And I have the utmost respect. Otherwise, I wouldn't have interviewed people like Bernardo Kastrup and Spira and so on and so on. And in fact, I tend to primarily interview those people because they think contrary to me.
Which is, man, and I honestly, very much so. Curt is very, very good here with understanding the spiritual community and being open to understanding them. So, like, lots and lots and kudos to him. He's very open. He's the type of person that we like to understand, and we want to be like this type of person, right? Because he's very developed in the intellectual sphere, but he's open to other forms of development. This is what we like. This is what we want. And we want to be developed in whatever sphere it is that you like. You can pick whatever one you like, but you want to be open to all the other ones too. And you don't want to get into this sort of the stuckness of trying to develop your spirituality and then neglecting all the other things. So anyway, Curt seems to be very open to understanding and developing other things. But unfortunately, he has to give this caveat because a lot of people aren't quite... People think that a lot of any sort of criticism, any sort of pushback, any sort of probing, any sort of needing clarification is attacking a position where it's not necessarily that. But anyway, he gives this clarification here. He's trying to say, he wants us to understand very clearly he's not demeaning spirituality or whatever you want to call this community. He's not trying to put it down. He's not. It doesn't seem like he is at all. He seems very open here.
I see people, I see them as being motivated and not knowing that they're motivated. So for example, they'll mention Gödel, or they'll mention that the universe looks at a certain scale to have the same connections as neuronal connections. Okay, well, how did Gödel get to?
Isn't it just trying to share with you what is right under your nose? Isn't that just trying to share with you what's right under its nose?
When I'm asking for specificity, it's the same process that Gödel did in order to show that set theory as we had it. Well, it's actually even more profound than set theory, but whatever, that a formal system that has certain qualities has truths within it that one can't prove within. Okay, whatever. That was from a deep investigation into the details. And the reason why I pin you down, or I'm carping, it's not because I'm trying to prove you wrong in any way, shape, or form. It's because I'm trying to understand, and I know as someone who's studied some topics like mathematics and physics and philosophy extremely deeply, that much of what we think makes sense on the surface upon closer investigation falls apart. Yep. It's like you're fighting a ghost, and you don't realize it until you investigate it at its extremes, until you want to know, well, what do you precisely mean by so and so and so and so? And thus, I'm not being unfairly captious. I'm trying to get to the essence. I also know that what can seem like it makes sense on the surface is misleading when tackled from a different angle.
Yes.
So arguments are enthymemic, meaning that they have embedded in them unstated assumptions, and that they take an inordinate amount of time to.
Oh, I love that. Oh man, that's so good. What the heck was that word? Arguments are enthymemic? Arguments are enthymemic? I don't know what that word is. I'm not sure if it means intha, like intro, inthra, inside. Mimic. I don't know if this is a word he made up or not. Curt likes to do this kind of thing sometimes. Enthymematic is not a word that he made up. This is in logic of the nature of containing in enthymeme. Okay, that's not helpful. Pertaining to enthymeme. Okay. A syllogism in which one of the premises or conclusions is not stated explicitly. Okay, very good. Yes. So when you're having particular types of arguments, or when you're having particular types of discussions, it comes along with it unstated assumptions or premises. We'll call it premises. Unstated premises, which are not explicitly stated. Enthymematic. Okay.
Decompress or to uncompress, sorry. And thus, if you ask me, well, is your awareness, like you asked me a simple question, is awareness aware of awareness? Okay, it seems like it is. Yes. Okay, Curt, why don't you just say it is? Because I don't know if it is. I see it seeming like it is in this moment, but give me enough time and a counter proposition may emerge, or a counter feeling. I'm not going to just sit here and accept what I don't feel is irrefragable.
Very good. You don't want to accept random things. Well, maybe you do want to accept them for developing in particular worldviews, but you don't want to accept them and hold them forever, right? These are, wow, I love this phrase, enthymematic, right? It comes with so many assumptions and so many different things which need to be investigated, and we want to be able to investigate those. And hopefully if a person is in these sort of spiritual worldviews and understanding spirituality or whatever sort of brand of whatever it is that you like to develop, hopefully you can understand and see from a perspective outside of that form of development and outside of that form of engagement to see what the assumptions are from a different vantage point. You can investigate those. And to investigate the assumptions doesn't mean that you abandon your initial or your original way of engaging in the world. Keep engaging in that way. The external assumptions and the external evaluation of your worldview doesn't invalidate it. It's a completely different thing. But you do want to strengthen other worldviews too, and you want to be aware of them and see that there are other forms of engagement and development to be developed.
I'm going to attack it or at least I don't have to attack it. It just comes up, and I'm presenting what appears in my mind. So please don't think of me as being. I don't want you to think I'm being unfair to you. I respect and I love you, but
Me
that's
too.
what's going through my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. It's a dialectic. It's really, truly just a dialectic. And
Me too.
when I feel into where you're coming from right now, I very much sense a lot of scientific, a lot of
He's
a
misreading
lot
it.
of logic and a lot of proof. Like, I want proof. But the proof, the most, in a sense, truest proof is your direct experience above all else.
I think he's misreading. I think he's misreading a little bit here. But yeah, what's up, Chronix? I can see you. How you doing? I feel like Atlas is misreading this because he may be misunderstanding or feeling like there are certainly lots of people who do get sort of stuck in their scientific worldview and they want proof and they need everything to be empirical or whatever, and they don't want to step outside of that. I don't think Curt is doing that. Curt is most comfortable in the scientific worldview because that's how he's developed himself. He's learned science and mathematics and physics and mathematics, and that's good. And we can understand that and leverage that. But just tell him that you want to get out of those assumptions, and then he will. It seems like he's very comfortable doing that type of thing. So you have to express that and let him know that you want to get a little bit outside of the worldview that he's most comfortable in. But it doesn't mean that he is I don't think he's stuck there. I don't think that at all.
As in, when you become aware that this is one intelligence talking to itself, so it becomes more transpersonal. You've heard that word, right, thrown around before on the shows and in conversation. Does this make sense? Like, it becomes more transpersonal. Like, the whole game of the universe becomes more transpersonal. Like, the Curt boundary, the boundary becomes perforated. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. And so then it becomes your direct experience that the boundary has become perforated. So you went from what is more of like a centralized connectome, neuroscientifically, to what is more of like a decentralized connectome or a universalized connectome, where you now see that this is one intelligence talking to itself in an explorative way, exploring one of endless possibility through this Earth orbiting the star. And there's many other Earths orbiting stars, and that there's many other potential universes where there are other Earths orbiting stars with other conscious agents that are exploring possibility, right? You sort of following that train a little bit? Okay.
Would you consider them to be, let's
Mm-hmm.
get down into the details of this particular statement. Do you consider there to be other universes, or is the fact that it exists and the criteria for it to be in the universe, meaning it exists, imply that there's only one universe? So that is, why don't you just call the collection of them universe? So
Okay, and this is something I love from Curt. He asked he asked questions in such a strange manner, and it's very endearing. It's very nice. I just, because it expresses how he's viewing it from many perspectives at the same time. He asked a very simple question: is there one universe? And he's trying to like disambiguate all the words that he's using. So he makes this massive type question: is there one universe? Because there may be multiple universes, and if we see multiple universes, then we may as well call them all one universe because it's all a part of the universe. And if there's anything outside the universe, it's part of the universe. You don't have to add all that clarification, Curt. But I like to see it. I love it. He asks these questions a lot. And these types of questions on his channel. He likes to give lots of preamble for long questions. It's really nice. So
if there are two
I'm a fan of
universes, the
this.
collection is the universe. It's just, let's say, subset of the universe, two subsets. So I'm curious, in the definition of universe, does yours include all that there is to reality? Because if that's what it means, then there can't be multiple universes.
Well, just remember that universe means one song. And so the universes, or the multiverse or the metaverse, would mean many songs, potentially up to infinite songs. And so when you begin viewing creation, this universe, as one song, you begin seeing that the amount of possible songs is endless. You'll never come to the end of different ways that you can arrange musical notes into songs. And Curt,
I don't think that answered the question, but I love the answer. It's so good. Right. I love that answer. There's so many universes and it's all a song, and you can divide the song however you like. You can listen to these two notes and call it a melody, or you can listen to the whole song and call it one melody. It doesn't really matter how you evaluate it. Kind of expanding on how Atlas answered. I like Atlas's answer. I loved it a lot. That's how I see it. The way that you evaluate, the way that you collect it, to say that it's all one universe, or maybe you can say this part is a universe and this other part's not the universe, that's a different universe, or whatever. This part's real, that part's unreal. It's all arbitrary. You can do it however you like. It's all a song, and you can divide it up in however way you want. So whether you call it all one universe and collect everything together, whether you call it all a part of the multiverse, whatever, it doesn't really matter. However you like. But sure, there is one thing that is everything, which would include everything, which would include nothing, which would include all the fictions and whatever. You can call it whatever you want. Some people call it universe. Okay, fine. Some people call the subsection that is relevant to our physical world, they call that the universe, and all the other stuff is something different. Okay, whatever. Call it whatever you want. It's all a song. And there are infinite songs, and you can infinitely divide it however you want, and you can classify it however you like. The possibilities are endless here.
We also stay with the perforation a little bit more.
Let's get back to that.
Yeah, okay,
Dissolution of the boundaries.
Beautiful. So I know that you know, and it's so beautiful because I know you know, and that because you've been searching for, as Rumi says, you've been looking from room to room for the diamond that is already around your neck. And 6 months ago, boom, I went into a nervous system shock when I finally got what Rumi meant.
Can you explain what you mean by nervous system shock? What happened to you?
Well, just like 10 minutes of just curled over in the fetal position because I finally got it, which is I am it. We are it. Exploring.
Okay, here's a counter proposition.
Okay.
Given that the mind is self-deceptive, how do you know that that's not a deception? Given that plenty of what we experience is said to be an illusion, well, how do you know what you just experienced is not just another illusion? Free will is an experience, by the way, but free will is also said to be an illusion. So how do you know that this insight is a reflection of reality rather than the deceptive quality of one's own mind? Simply because you feel it extremely deeply to be true? Is that the criteria? Because if that is the criteria, well, there's plenty of contradictory, deeply felt theories and truths.
Of course. Atlas being very thoughtful here.
I hope you don't feel like I'm attacking you, man.
Not at all.
Honestly.
I love you. I love you so much. By the way, I also want to say that this conversation, I feel like, is one of the best ways for the internet, for all of us, to undergo a process of understanding what the nature of reality is.
Okay, so we kind of lost the track immediately. It was a good question. Atlas is being very thoughtful, and then okay, now we're off on like clarifying that it's okay, I guess, that this is a good thing. I think he comes back to it. I think I started watching around this time, and he does come back to answer. So let's wait for the answer before I chime in a little bit.
And so I'm feeling a really strong brotherhood between us, where we can potentially continue doing this maybe once a quarter or something, where we're just revisiting where we're at in this process of
podcast therapy. Yeah, like, well, inflorescence, just the blooming of a flower.
Yeah, that's very good. So again, this seems very weird to me. Like he's there seems to have been. I watched that little bit of a mismatch there with that sort of missing the question, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. he's asking for more interviews. Like they want to like hang out more often. I wonder what happened before. And like it didn't seem like there was a lot before that was a lot of meshing together that made them build up a lot of camaraderie. And from the bit that I saw, it didn't seem like they were. So this is even more weird to me that Atlas kind of wants them to hang out more, and it doesn't seem like they're gelling very much at all. From my perspective, it doesn't seem like they're gelling at all. It seems like Alan is kind of coming off very rudely. So maybe I'm misunderstanding or evaluating this, and I've got a little bit of a somehow flawed judgment in this interaction. But it seems very bizarre how they're connecting or not connecting or misconnecting here. It seems very, very bizarre and strange that Alan wants to see more or hang out more. Atlas, sorry, wants to hang out with him more. And Curt seems open to it too. So apparently I'm completely misjudging that there's a strong disconnect, any sort of like, apparently it's not a very strong disconnect and nothing. There's no like ill will between the two. I don't sense any ill will, but I guess it's not as clunky as I seem to think it is because he seems open to want to hang out more and discuss more further and maybe understand things a little bit more deeply. But I feel like Atlas has not answered any question to give any deeper understanding. Anyway, let's find out more. All right. I think he answers that
by time.
Yes, and look at how many people were in the comments saying that we love you both. This is great. Like I do feel really strong about
it's very strange.
This because also, Curt, what you're doing in a sense is you're playing, like the question you just asked was so perfect, which is that how do you know that this mind that is so magical, how do you know that it's uniting with the nature of reality and that it's not deceiving you? That's a great question. And so many people want to hear these styles of, this is basically, science and spirituality, which we both represent both. We both represent both. This is them both coming to a union. It's us exploring the synthesis between science and spirituality, which are the two greatest driving forces behind our planet, period.
Interesting.
There's nothing that drives us more than those two forces. And so to unite them, to figure out how to unite them, I feel like is the 21st century. This is what we are doing this century, because we're turned inward and we're analyzing more and more of the innerscape at the same time that we're meeting planetary basic needs. And
what a phrase, the innerscape. I've never heard that one before. Where did Atlas get that one from? I like that one, innerscape. Man, I gotta watch more of watch more Atlas's solo videos because he does a lot of solo videos, which I quite enjoy, but I haven't watched a lot of them recently. I usually watch a lot of his interviews though. But man, I've never heard that word, interscape. I love how he also goes through reading different books very often and fleshing out his own worldview with PowerPoints or slideshows and lots of graphics and things like that, which is very, very good. So we can tell that he's a pretty smart guy. But man, there seems to be a bit of a mismatch here. Why did I pause? I paused for a reason, but I don't remember why. So we'll continue.
Maximizing our external architectures that enable people to self-actualize and self-realize. And so I'm feeling a really strong resonance
between
us. And so let's explore what you asked.
Okay.
So
I can restate it if you like.
I have the question.
Okay.
Very thoughtful again. Atlas here.
There's so many thoughts.
Okay. Here. Okay.
And we can tell that Curt is not the kind of person who likes to sit with silence for a very long period of time, apparently. That's interesting enough.
It's uniting with the force that made you.
That is not going to answer the question. So I love Atlas, and the way that he's answering these questions are so like lofty and poetic, and they've got their sort of profundity with it. And he's got his sort of weirdo animated style. He's laughing a lot. He's being kind of goofy. He's sometimes he makes kind of weird faces. I love it so much. He's such a funny guy, and I like it a lot. But that's not going to answer the question. That's not answering the question at all of what Curt is asking here. How do you know that what you're experiencing, when you're finding some insight into the nature of reality, is real or true or not a delusion? Hey, how do you know? The answer is it's about the nature of experience. It doesn't matter what experience you have, right? This is a sort of a basic answer. It doesn't matter if you're hallucinating, doesn't matter if you're dreaming, doesn't matter if you're in some sort of the base level of physical reality. None of that matters. What matters is that you're paying attention to your experience. And when you have these sort of weirdo mystical experiences, you broaden your range of the type of experiences that you've had so that you can understand what it is, what experience itself is. So you have your normal, typical type experiences, and you have something way outside of that. Some people even have no experience, but we don't have to go that far. You have something way outside of that into your mystical experiences. And then you realize, oh, what I thought was experience is not all that experience is. Experience is something more. So you've learned about the nature of experience. You've not learned about reality. You've not learned about experience. You've learned about the nature of experience and the nature of reality. Doesn't matter if you're hallucinating. You can hallucinate. It doesn't matter if you're delusional. You can be delusional. That does not matter. It's about the nature of delusion. It's about the nature of hallucination. It's about the nature of experience. That's the answer. But that's not the answer that Atlas gave us. So I don't know if this is going to land for Curt because this is a non-answer.
It's a clear uniting with the force that made you.
Okay, you're giving me an answer. Do you mind telling me the question that you're answering? Because I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So again, when I watched this, I started around this area, and man, it seems like they are not on the same page, right? They're so off on the same page that when Atlas is giving these answers, which are like, I understand why he's answering in the way, because he's in this sort of spiritual mode of engagement, and he's getting all these lofty sort of poetic type of it reads as poetic. It's not really poetic, but from the sort of normal way of engaging, it seems poetic. So I do want to be careful to not make it seem like he's only being poetic. He's answering like the answers properly, but in a spiritual way. And he's not answering in the sort of intellectual way that would actually translate to a person who is intellectually trying to understand it. So it seems like he doesn't understand the question. It seems like he's dodging, or it seems like he's just completely missing the point. But Atlas is a very smart guy. And he's not missing the point. He's not missing the question. He understands. He can probably, he's going to give the question very clearly. But from Curt's perspective, it seems like he's not answering the question at all. And he's been doing that since the beginning of the video. Just kind of giving these sort of broad non-answers. Because he's engaging in a very different type of way. So this is fascinating.
Otherwise, it's simply a statement of
It's just a statement.
Cookie. I don't know.
Fortune cookie, yes. It's just a random statement, man.
How does one know
Yes.
when their mystical experience, and again, mysticism just means becoming one with God, means becoming one with the divine.
He can't even just state the question without clarifying. Anyway,
how does one know when?
So I feel like I'm being a little bit overly harsh to Atlas sometimes when he's being a little bit verbose. I'm thinking of his verbosity as dodging, but then when Curt's being verbose, I'm thinking of that as being nuanced. So we can notice a little bit of a bias there coming out. Anyway,
they're mystical or yoga means union. How does one know when their union is true versus delusional?
Okay. Well,
not quite the question, but close
was
enough.
that the question? That's what it appeared like.
Because in the question you're assuming an answer, which is the mysticism, which is the unity with God and the yoking. So I'm saying, how do you know that whatever you see is true, not whether your insight about Sorry, not whether or not the union is true. I'm asking, how do you know your felt experience if what we're taking primary is experience? All right, man, let's do it together.
I love it. Yeah, we're both on
Okay.
the standing game now. To relax the lower back. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and also I need to. I'm gonna go for a long walk tomorrow, as I mentioned that
Oh, wow. I wonder if he's like going on a special type of hike.
I've been cooped up and working, and I'm looking forward to having a great rest tonight, man.
That's good.
Appreciate this conversation. I'm having a joy talking to you, and if you want to talk for longer too, another time, more than welcome to.
So excited.
Okay,
Wow.
so let me get back
I
to
love it.
Yes.
See, again, I love this. This is so good. There's a lot of camaraderie going on here. Again, I've sort of making it out to be like there's a complete mismatch, but they seem to have a lot of some sort of social bond that's happening that I want to be careful to make sure that I'm not completely misreading it, because there's a bit of a mismatch in engagement. One's being very spiritual and sort of lofty and profound and mystical spiritual nonsense, and Curt's being a little bit more rational, trying to pin down specific reasoning here. But even though there's that kind of mismatch, they're both actually socially cohering with each other and being well and having some sort of social resonance. So that's very good. I'm glad that they can do that in spite of the sort of mismatch of engagement. I'm glad that they can still have that social resonance going on, which is very good.
Which is that it sounds like you are saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also echoed by people like Spira, which is that experience is primary, and from experience you can derive some truths, and one of these truths are that we're all one, and that all there is experience, or all there is awareness. Sometimes awareness being aware of awareness, but awareness nonetheless.
True.
And I'm asking, how does one know your experience of so-and-so? Well,
Uniting with
almost
the
like a-
force that gave rise to you was my answer to that question.
Uniting with the force that gives rise to you, right? He's talking about the nature of the experience. It's not about what you're experiencing now. It's not about how or where that experience, it's not about how that experience arises. It's about where it comes from. What is that experience? The nature of the experience. And that is the nature of all of experiences, all of your experiences, the wide, broad range of experiences. And that is the nature of all experience. Every experience comes from the same place. And it's the nature of experience. That's how you know, because it doesn't matter what experience you have. It's not an experience that you have when you awaken to the realization of blah, 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 whatever. It's not an experience. It's about the nature of experience. You notice the nature of experience. So that's how you know that everything is one. Everything is the same. We're all coming from the same source, the sort of spiritual nonsense that people like to say. This is because it's about the nature of experience, not about experience. You can't be wrong about it. You can't be wrong. It's the nature of experience. It's not experience. It doesn't matter what experience you have.
Question.
Okay, you're saying it's true because it's uniting.
It's true because that's good. I like that. And then how about also it's true because there's an experience of basically uniting with the energy that gave rise to you, the force that gave rise to you, the force that gives rise to all life. When people talk about oneness or unity, it's like uniting with that force itself that gave rise. If we play with the Big Bang Theory, it would be like uniting with the force that gave rise to the Big Bang. That would be what.
Okay, now let me see if I can correct that. Mm-hmm. And if this correction is apt.
Okay.
Is it more like realizing that you're uniting? Because one cannot help but unite. They can only realize that this uniting is occurring all the time.
Sure.
Realizing.
You can't not be united. You can't not be the thing. Being it, identifying with it, not necessarily how you need to express it, but it is necessary for experience. It is what experience is. It's the nature of experience. It's where experiences come from. When you notice that, it's noticing that. That's all it is. Noticing where all experiences come from. That's what that's what Atlas is talking about here. And this is how you can't be wrong about your experience here, because you're just noticing something. You're noticing the nature of all experiences, and it doesn't matter what experience you have when you notice the nature of your experience. All experience.
Yeah, that's why it's called self-realization or God realization. It's a realization.
You realize.
What's actualization mean then? Sometimes people say
Yes,
self-actualization.
beautiful.
Is that a synonym? And if they're different, how are they different?
I love this. Beautiful question. So when you view self-realization or God realization, that is the turn inward and uniting with that force that gave rise to you, like we were just discussing. And then self-actualization is more like the Tony Robbins style, or like Gary Vaynerchuk style, like executing a dream, like actualizing your unique firework of life.
I like it. Okay.
So it's a little bit more around empowerment versus enlightenment, but those two are the same side of the coin, two different sides of the same coin.
Okay.
So self-actualization and self-realization are actually one. So most people, when they go outward to actualize something, that's like what I've noticed is that people from mainstream society, the first thing that they do is they go on a hero's journey, which is self-actualization. They usually go into the unknown to try and go through some challenges and obstacles to gain some sort of profound insight, treasure, and then to bring that back to their community. And so it's usually people leaving the 9-to-5, pursuing entrepreneurship, stuff like that. And then what happens is they also undergo a process of the turn inward in understanding, well, what is the nature of consciousness? What is the nature of my reality at a deeper level than the material aims that I have? And so that's usually where those two end up meeting. Why do you ask? But I also would like to play with the perforation a little bit more of your essence, because I feel like that's where for a moment, like we had something so unique there, which was that you knew that becoming transpersonal was key. So maybe we play on like what have been your experiences with becoming more perforated or transpersonal.
Him standing is just so goofy to me.
I've had experiences that.
Why did he stand? It's so ridiculous. He's trying to match the energy. I think he's doing well. In some ways, he seems to be doing fine, and in other ways, he seems to not be doing well. Atlas here trying to match the energy of Curt, but the standing in order to match the energy, so that just seems so bizarre to me for some reason. I think it's very funny, but he's missing the intellectual energy and the rigorous type energy. Anyway, just a side note. I think it's very goofy. I like Atlas a lot. He's so goofy.
Where I've felt as if what I am is a tentacle in an octopus, and that going back to the source shares me with everyone, though we're all connected and we're temporarily differentiated. But then again, I say I've had that experience, and in some ways I think it's true, but in some ways I don't take my experiences or what is said with agreement in the scientific or even spiritual community as apodictic, like most people.
Apodictic? Oh my goodness. So many words. Apodicted. Apodictic. Demonstrative. That's it. In logic, the term a term descriptive of a form of judgment in which the connection of a subject and predicate is asserted to be necessary, asserting its own necessity. Okay, so this does not make it necessarily the case, right? For him to have an experience that is in resonance with what other people are saying in the spiritual community does not make it necessarily true. I think that's what he means by apodictic.
Wonder what's the alternative, and I'm just not sold. I'm just not sold on it. It could be true, but then at the same time, then I wonder, even if it is true, is it saying anything that's not a tautology? So, for example, Rupert Spira seems to be saying something both non-trivial and trivial at the same time. Experience is experience seems to me to be at the bottom of what he's saying, which is a tautology.
I would think that it's extremely trivial. when you're speaking from the language of the thing that you're speaking at, it's extremely trivial. It has to be trivial because at the base level, it's just what it is. In the same way, saying like reality is reality. Okay. Science is science. Sure. It's trivial. It's tautological in some sense. Okay, maybe I'm using that word too loosely here. Experience is experience. Yeah, duh. Beauty is beautiful. Okay, sure, yeah, duh. Beauty is beauty, man. Obviously. Art is art. Yeah. However, you're going to express the thing that you're expressing within the frame of reference that you're trying to express it from is going to sound very trivial because it is trivial. And experience, this sort of spiritual stuff, when expressed in that way, is going to be very trivial. How is it non-trivial?
So I don't know.
I love it. What a beautiful experience that you've had, a beautiful realization that you've had, because in essence, that's what science is even pointing to in the same way that spirituality has been pointing to for millennia, which is that there's this unified differentiation, and then the differentiation wakes up to its unification.
So here's a question I have.
I love Atlas so much. This is so good. But, so again, Atlas is saying good, beautiful experience, even though Curt, half a second ago in his last sentence, when he was talking last, he was saying very specifically that his experience doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that his experience is lining up with what science is saying. It doesn't matter that his experience is lining up with what philosophy is saying. It doesn't matter that his experience is lining up with what spirituality is saying. He wants to understand why that experience is real or true or leading to something. He needs to like understand it rationally, logically, or understand in some sense at least, express how is it so that what he experienced is lined up with the truth. And then Atlas, disregarding all that and just saying, oh, it's so beautiful that you had a nice experience. It lines up with what spirituality says, and it lines up with what science says. Well, yeah, he just dismissed that a second ago. Now, obviously, we had a little bit of advantage because Curt used a weird word, apodictic, which I guess we should take our time to criticize Curt too, because he's using language that is very bizarre. It's not very bizarre, but he seems to be speaking terms which are used in logic and like strict logic, which I'm guessing most people don't know. And I'm guessing Curt should know that most people don't know it. So maybe Curt should be a little criticized here for using his own personal insular language when speaking to people who he should understand are not in his personal insular community, who know very, very strict logical terms or know the sort of jargon that he's using. Though he's using it because it has a very specific definition and he wants to be very clear with how he's expressing himself. But since it's so unique, so insular, such a word that wouldn't be known by the public, maybe you should clarify a little bit. So a little bit of extra criticism for Curt there. Speak the language of the people that you're trying to speak with, right? Use the local language. This is one of the rules in Buddhism. If you're teaching, speak the local language. Don't speak in Pali. It's against, I don't remember which of the laws or which of the sets of rules it's against, but it's against the monastic rules to teach in Pali. You don't teach to lay people in Pali. You teach in their local language. So we should understand that and take it forward. If you're speaking and you're trying to teach spirituality, don't speak your own personal spiritual language. It's not going to work. No one understands it. You need to speak their language. And if you're trying to teach your own worldview and your own logical whatever, don't speak some sort of strict nonsense. Speak the language that the people are speaking so that people can understand you. It's very important.
For you,
Yeah.
how does fractionation occur from unity?
It's beautiful. I know it's the most unbelievably profound thing. Through what we hypothesize, one of the ways we hypothesize this is there's a veil of forgetting. That's one of the components. Wow. That's really important. So you know upon differentiation that there's a veil of forgetting that has to be pierced through. to remember. So it's like hide and seek. You see the archetype in kids and you see the archetype in animals even. The hide and seek style archetype is sort of like the game that is being played. So there's some sort of a veil that has to be pierced through to remember this, which is profound. Yeah, go ahead.
If there's a reason to forgetting, just like kids playing hide and seek,
Is there?
That also seems to me like that's on purpose. Maybe it's dangerous to remember. Is there a danger to remembering?
Beautiful. I love this a lot. So these are very good questions. What is this mechanism of forgetting things? Well, in lots of spiritual worldviews, there is no mechanism for forgetting things. You haven't forgotten anything. There's no forgetting. It's all obvious and it's all here currently, and there's no forgetting. You just are saying that you don't forget it or don't remember that there is this connection between everything. But you can go through all these different worldviews and express all the different ways of interpreting and trying to express this sort of mechanism for forgetting, or the sort of method for forgetting things, or the reason for forgetting. But those are just approximations and helpful ways of expressing it to try to help people in different worldviews. But there is no forgetting from the spiritual perspective. You've never been separated. You've never not known. You've always known. There's been the appearance of not knowing, if you want to try to pull an olive branch for people who think that they don't understand or already know that they are God, whatever spiritual nonsense you want to say. But you can't forget. You've never forgotten. That's one perspective. So you may want to express that a little bit, but Atlas doesn't give us that. And then the secondary question he asked, I don't remember what it was. Gonna reverse a bit.
Like, why should we remember, even if it's true?
Oh, why should we remember? Oh, if there's a reason for, there must be a reason for the misremembering. So it's probably a bad thing to remember. The universe has set it up so that there is misremembering. So we should maybe just not remember this because it seems to be bad. Well, you can go a lot of different routes for that, but I would just go down the route of there is no reason for it to misremember. Reason happens within some fields of understanding and some models of the world and some areas of development. In the sort of spiritual area, no reasons. There is no reason for it to have been forgotten. That's how I'll go about it. A lot of people like to go around the route of expressing it as some sort of God was bored. I don't like this perspective at all. A lot of people like to go down that route. God was bored, or maybe, that's the most common, I guess, I hear in the spiritual circles. I don't know, maybe I'll think about that. Let me write that question down so I can see if I can engage with it a little bit more strictly at another time.
Perfect. Exactly.
If this infinite being is far greater and far more elucidated than us, and it said, hey, man, you should differentiate, and then we're coming back and saying, no, we should unify, and in fact, that's the highest good. How do we know?
It's perfect. I love this. This is the exact riddle to the universe. This is the exact riddle to infinity expressing itself, is this, which is that you purposely refracted and differentiated to explore and play. Why would you pierce through this veil and become unified again when the whole point was to differentiate? And it's a beautiful question, and it's the riddle, because you do both simultaneously, where you pierce through this veil and remember, so you don't create unnecessary malevolence because you think that people are separate from the same unified life force. But then while you pierce through that veil and remember, you also express yourself differently. You don't forget that Curt is uniquely, beautifully differentiated than Atlas, than Rupert, than Donald, than Chris.
You call yourself Atlas or Alan?
You can call me Atlas. Yeah. Yeah. It's
okay,
it's sort of.
Is this new?
Yeah. It's since about 2 years ago, one of my friends came up.
Search results.
Google thought I was talking to.
About 2 years ago, one of my friends came through and was like, Atlas is is what I feel like is your name. And then only recently, about 8 months ago or so, did I make the transition fully to just one word, Atlas, as my name, from Alan Sakyan, which
So
some people,
officially, you've
yeah,
made this
officially,
transition?
it's been great, bro. Yeah.
Wow.
It's been great. And Atlas has a lot of profound, cartography is one of the things that I'm most interested in, right? Some sort of cartography around the nature of reality. That's why we're here together, bro. You're literally mapping the landscape of the theories of everything. And I have the same style of passion to this. And we're both young. You're like 30, right?
32.
32. And I'm 28. We're both right there, bro. That's our little average age
Co-equal.
right there. Yep.
Okay. You just said that's the mystery of the universe. Is that, well, the point is to do both? Is that what you said?
Yes, because everyone promulgates oneness when they're like, people are awake. They're like, it's one planet. So some people see it from a physicalism perspective, and they see it like there's only one planet. There's 10 million species. It's like the Gaia thing. Everything evolved on the planet. So there's the oneness mentality there. And then there's the people that turn inward to consciousness, and then they say oneness, and they say unification, and they say that. But meanwhile, the whole point of this process was to differentiate. And so then you have the people that are like hyper differentiation oriented. And so they're the ones that are like, everyone actualized their unique firework into the arena of reality. And so you have to merge the two. The reason why it's the riddle is because you have to merge unification and differentiation.
Well, this to me, again, is why I see non-dualism as thinly veiled nihilism.
It is. Take the nihilist pill. I wanted to pause before. Crap, what did he say? He said something that I liked a lot. Or was it something I disliked? I can't remember. You do both. Some people do that. External differentiation. It's a mystery. That's the one I was coming at. So I like to re-express the sort of, there are a lot of people in the spiritual community, these types of communities, that say it's just a mystery, or it's a paradox, or maybe you get into some more religious communities, not quite just, religious communities use the word mystery also. Some people may say it's a struggle. So maybe like the struggle with God, or you wrestle with God, or you have this doubt about certain things, this sort of language. I like to express that as saying that indicates that it is the wrong method of engagement with the problem. So if you're getting to this area where everything is mysterious, it's because you're using the wrong form of investigation or evaluation for the wrong thing. So in this case, we're using our intellectual mind to think about spirituality, and it comes out to be this great mystery. Why? It's this great mystery, and we struggle with it. And when you struggle with it, what you do is you want to go and you develop your spiritual worldview, which doesn't involve thinking about it too much. But then you want to go back and develop your intellectual worldview, where you do investigate and think about certain things. So it's a struggle in that you're going between many different types of worldviews. That's how I'd like to put it. It's a mystery because it's not the appropriate way of evaluating it. It's a mystery because you shouldn't be thinking about reasons why you need to differentiate or not differentiate. It's not the appropriate method for going about it. That's why it's a mystery. Now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't investigate it, because you can still investigate it. You can still have the sort of rigorous intellectual model for understanding that. But that's what the mystery part means, I would say. And this also applies to so many other things, right? If you fall in love, why did you fall in love? Well, it's a mystery. You don't really know. You don't know what the heck is going on. It's not really appropriate to think about why in terms of falling in love. You don't really give reasons for why you love your wife or your husband. It's not the appropriate method. Now, obviously, if somebody asks you, you can give reasons, and it's not wrong to give the reasons full stop in every case. But we can understand, hopefully most of us understand, that when you give the answer why you love your wife because she's kind, and why you love your husband because he cooks really well or whatever, those aren't the actual reasons. Because if they stop cooking, or that's not going to make you stop loving them, right? In the same case, why do you like your music, the music that you like? Well, I just like it. I just like the music that I like. I just like Beethoven. Beethoven's cool, man. I just like it. It's a mystery. It's a great mystery. It's profound. This is the great paradox that we struggle with. Yes, in one sense, but then also in the other sense, I can tell you about all the music theory that I like about it, and the structure of sonata form and why it resonates with me in some particular way. But I can understand that the answers that I'm giving are not the correct, they're not the actual way to be engaging with that field. To engage with music is not to evaluate what I like and dislike about it. That's not how you do it. So when I give that answer, it's not actually right. It's actually a great mystery. Because the way that you engage with it is not with the intellectual mind. So that's how I'd put that.
Because if the point of existence is to merge what's been differentiated, that's predicated on the differentiation. And the differentiated people are considered to be evil, which means we need the evil.
What?
Which sounds to me like an argument for not doing good nor evil, because either are okay.
I think neither good nor evil.
Yeah, so I would take one step back from there, and I would say that so differentiation does not necessarily equate with ignorance or evil and whatnot. I would potentially say that if you can if you can pierce through the veil and merge unification and differentiation simultaneously, you can have what is like the most holistic understanding of how infinity expresses itself as realities. So there's one unified force, but it purposely differentiates itself to undergo this play and to pierce through this veil, to remember itself, and then to express itself from the place of remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that last key? So if you express yourself from the place of solely differentiation, you will not know that you come from the same unified force. But if you first unite with the unified force and then express yourself like a firework, you'll come from a place of unity as you differentially express yourselves. And so that's why the phrase, you gotta go inward first to go outward right. It's the sure cause of delight. You got to go inward first to go outward right. It's the sure cause of delight.
Wow. What a poem. I like this a lot. I like this a lot. This is very good. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, 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 yes. I would say that this is very similar to, I mean, I would express it very differently, obviously, but of course you want to encourage this sort of holistic understanding of the world, where you go inward first and you do your spiritual inwardness, and then you can be free to go outwards. And the way that I would express that is to just suggest that there are many forms of development that are available to us. And this is very simple to understand when you start to engage with multiple forms of development. You start to engage with this sort of spiritual form of development, and you can recognize that it is inappropriate to be trying to evaluate this form of development with your intellectual mind. You just develop spiritually, and you can see that they're very separate things. And once you understand that, it makes it much easier to engage with the world, because then you can start to understand that all these different forms of engagement are valid, and they can be developed in whatever way they need to be developed. And you can rest back at home with your spiritual development, or whatever development you like. Personally, it doesn't really matter. But you have this broader understanding that you have other forms of development available. That's how I'd express it. And I think it's very important to see the world a lot more openly in that way. And you can become more holistic. We can start using the nonsense spiritual language if you want to. You become more holistic, and you've looked inside, and now you can be in the world without being of the world. These are alternative ways of saying what I'm saying, but with a little bit more spiritual language kind of sprinkled on top of it. I don't think the spirituality needs to be sprinkled on top of it, no less, but whatever. I like it a lot. I think it's a very good message. Engage with this form of engagement, spirituality, and then you can understand that you can go free and engage in the world in other ways, alternative ways, and those are valid too. And you never forget that you have alternate ways of developing in the world. You want to go inward first, so you can go outward right. It is the best form of delight. I misremembered, but something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can go outward from a place of not going inward first, and that's still just as beautiful at the same time.
It is.
So, because it's the way that infinity is expressing itself as somebody that chooses to not go inward first, and they choose to pursue material. They choose to pursue clout or money or fame or seeking worthiness or seeking validation from other people. And so that's also a unique exploration at the same time. But eventually, you're probably familiar with things like the parable of the prodigal son. You'll get a nice little sledgehammer. The drill sergeant of awakening, suffering, comes with a sledgehammer and whaps you on the forehead. And it forces you to turn inward because you don't actually get any long-term peace and happiness from acquiring material possessions or acquiring clout or fame or trying to extract worthiness or validation from people. And so the turn inward is almost inevitable, which is part of, it's like an attractor. This is where you might resonate with this. It's like an attractor, Curt. It's like you have this complex mathematics that the universe is evolving towards, which is in a sense, life waking up and then turning inwards to understand itself as the unified force that differentiated.
Man, I don't know if that lands for Curt or not. I don't think I would like if people were trying to use the language of Atlas is trying to use the language of mathematics and that sort of worldview to express his worldview without understanding the mathematics and the science and the whatever worldview deeply enough. It seems it can come off in that way. So I'm not sure if he would like that, but maybe Curt would like it. To me, if somebody were to try to do that, man, that's not something that I would vibe with very much at all. Not even a little bit. Because it seems like it sort of exposes more so the misunderstanding and this mismatch of energy when he's trying to express in mathematical terms without really understanding the mathematical terms. It can come off that way. Now, if he understood the mathematical terms a little bit more, I think it would land really well. Or if I don't know if he understands it or not, but if he were to express that understanding and show that understanding before he starts to bring in these metaphors and analogies with mathematics, then it would probably land a lot more. But I don't think he's shown that quite yet. So it comes off as very strange, a little weird.
But you got this. You're right there with me.
I know, but most people, I'm sure you would say, are right there anyway, because
see Curt here displaying a very good understanding of the spiritual worldview. Everyone is right there. You're already there. You already got it. So of course he would say that to everybody. Curt has a good understanding here. This is good to see.
it's just
Oh, but he's
it's
holding
always
back
with us. At least that's what
Perfect.
the claim is.
Yeah.
I
You
still
can't
don't-
not be. You're
I still
tethered to it.
I still don't see how or why an undifferentiated entity even conceivably can differentiate. Because let's say it picks a point to do so. That point would have to be distinguished. But we already said there's no distinguishing feature. So how do you distinguish without distinguishing?
Your question is, again, I feel like it is literally the most important question in the nature of reality. And I feel like one of the only ways to artistically be able to express this to kids is by looking at how white light refracts prismatically into the rainbow gradient. because that is sort of how this looks like, where you have this unified, undifferentiated light that then refracts into the prismatic differentiation, which sort of looks like, in a sense, the evolution of awareness or consciousness waking up to, itself.
That's an argument for pluralism to begin with, though, because if we investigate that analogy a bit further, the white light was never white. The white light was multitudinous to begin with.
Oh my goodness. Oh, tearing apart the analogy. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, light doesn't have like you don't have a wavelength that represents white light. White is a sort of broad representation of most of the wavelengths that we can see generally. And that just means that you have lots of different photons already that are adding up together to create whatever this effect is that you consider to be white. But when you put it through a prism and you differentiate them, it's not creating a new wavelengths, a new spectrum of wavelengths out of this sort of out of a white light that didn't have any of these wavelengths. It's more so ordering them, putting them into the right, putting them in the right place to see how many reds there were and how many blues there were and how many greens and so on and so forth. That would be a better way of thinking about it, a better way of thinking about it, to express the difference between sort of scattered light that sort of appears to be white and then sort of the more sorted colors, the sorted light, where you can see the actual distinctions between them all. Interesting. Analogy is destroyed. So how can you differentiate something that is undifferentiated? This is the question that we're stuck at, or that we're holding at the moment. He asked earlier, what is the mechanism for it? But how to differentiate something that is undifferentiated already? Because if you find somewhere to differentiate, if you make a place to differentiate, that is already assuming that there's a place to differentiate. There must have been differentiation before it starts to differentiate. So how does it differentiate? Easy question.
So if you can give me a different analogy, that would help.
So inherent in the white, well, isn't this the case that inherent in the white light is the potentiality for the differentiation?
Every individual photon
inherent.
would be...
Sorry, not. Don't mean to say no like so arrogantly, but white light comprises different colors from the get-go. There's no such photon as a white photon. So if you were to stop any individual one, you could detect its frequency, which is the same as its color. Yes.
Not exactly, but sort of. Yeah, you can detect its frequency. I guess the color of a photon, okay, sure, we'll take it. It's interesting to me that he thinks that saying no is arrogant. So maybe I should be more careful with myself if I'm ever in a conversation to not say no. Apparently that's arrogant. So we're learning some conversation skills with Curt. Okay.
The prism doesn't take white light and then create multiple different strands. That's already there in the white light.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'll ask my question, which is, how is it from a place of non-duality where there is no...
You said it's inherent in the source light, right? Isn't that the kind of the point? Is that inherent in the infinity expressing itself is the ability to differentiate and then undergo this creative process?
But that means it's already differentiated.
Okay, what I want to know is, how do you differentiate? Where do you differentiate if there is no difference? So how do you differentiate here, over here? Is it random? Well, then is there a random number generator that's outside the universe? Is the random generator a part of the universe? Then there's the universe plus a random generator. Well, is that not a distinct entity? So the universe is a random number generator at the same, that's what I'm saying. And then if you have a random number generator, well, then you have obviously differences in digits, which is not non-dual. So this is what I'm wondering. What allows for this differentiation from undifferentiated material when that's all that there is? All there is undifferentiation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm asking. I'm like genuinely curious. I don't know how to. It's like squaring a circle. I don't understand it. I don't know how to do it.
And the same thing is true on my end, which is that I can't speak to how the unbounded mystery that we are is truly being played. We can only create maps that get close to the territory. And so that's what we're doing right now is we're talking about maps that try their best to get as close to the territory as possible.
Yes, you have maps that you have models and things that give us close to the territory of the non-dual, non-differentiated, whatever mess of the meta world that we're trying to refer to into some of these spiritual circles when you're talking about non-duality or non-dualism or whatever this undifferentiated nonsense mess is. So give us some ways to express it. Give us some models for how we can differentiate some things. Let's try to think of one way here. Potentially the differentiation doesn't happen within the space of this sort of non-dual thing. It's not even a space, because to have space would be a differentiation. To have anything would be a differentiation. So where the differentiation happens is not within the realm of where the non-differentiation doesn't happen. Happening is also a part of the differentiation thing. So it's just completely different levels of understanding things. And then, of course, the next line would be, well, that the non-dual part is irrelevant to what we have here. I would be comfortable with that. I think that's a fine model of expressing somewhat a little bit of the understanding of how we get differentiation from non-differentiation, if we want to translate it into some sort of understandable logical framework. And I would say, yeah, it's fine to be completely irrelevant, and this sort of non-dual space has nothing to do with this sort of dual space or differentiated space that we're referring to. It's completely separate entities or completely separate things. But there's no differentiation in this sort of non-dual space. Here, let there be differentiations. That's kind of an offhand answer. I'm not sure if that would be a strong answer, or if it would be an answer that would be accepted under any scrutiny. But that's some model for understanding. I think it'd be fine if Atlas said he can think about it a little bit more and try to come up with something better. That'd be interesting. But yeah. How do you get differentiation if there's nothing to differentiate from?
It's almost like the best thing that the intelligence can do with itself is undergo the process of forgetting. And as it remembers, it tries to make maps of itself. And so one of my hypotheses is that Benoit Mandelbrot, that the infinite fractal zoom is as close.
You saw that laugh? Curt laughed a little bit. I don't think he likes to sort of bring in mathematical terms.
Of a approximation as we can get to how the infinite intelligence works, because you said in your last couple of sentences that there's a random number generator, so there's something that's absolutely chaotic about it, but at the same time there's something that's self-similar and purposeful about it. And so that's what it seems like, is that you have both merged together, where you have it's like a chef. If you viewed God or the supreme intelligence that we are as a chef, we know both what tastes good in our food, which is basically this, this two-eyed, four-limbed DNA encoded vehicle, but also we want to taste new qualities in our food. And so we also are randomly adding things into our expressions, creative expressions, that we then see how they unfold. How does that play with you?
From what you've said, it doesn't sound like non-duality to me. Mm-hmm. It sounds like there's dualities all over the place. And
have you ever heard of how the non-duality and duality and individuation are all simultaneously true? Have you ever heard that from a guest?
No.
Okay.
No.
So this is what we call true simultaneity. So there's the reason why you have people like Rupert and many other people that basically, and you've heard Bernardo even say this on the show before as well, but the only reason why he comes in with the position of metaphysical idealism is to like shift people towards that, but not to say that then physicalism is untrue. Because what you want to do is you want to hold that both are true simultaneously. Consciousness is dependent on physicalism, just like physicalism is dependent on consciousness. They're both dependent on one another. And so that's where you get this simultaneity, where you have both non-duality and duality and individuation that all happen simultaneously.
Are they both?
True simultaneity. And of course, I would express this as saying there are multiple ways of engaging in the world, and they're all valid, and you can develop them all. So you can develop your non-dual way where nothing is differentiated, and you can develop your dual way where everything is differentiated. Do both. Why not? Porque no los dos. Go for it.
Equal to one another, or are they just dependent on one another?
It feels like they codependently are part of the architecture. Everything is codependently part of the architecture. Non-duality, duality, individuation is all codependently part of the architecture. You'll never be able to get away with having only one of them. You have to always be able to refer to all of them at the same time.
Never? Certainly in the way that we express ourselves currently as humans in this normal understanding of the world, things codependently arise. Dualities are necessary for distinguishing certain things from something else, for understanding what something is. You need to have the opposite, or you need to have some sort of backdrop to see something. But that's only from our current perspective. It's not necessary, I would say. It's not necessary. But yes, from our current perspective, yeah, you gotta have your dualities to see the non-dualities, and that's when we are expressing it normally, naturally. But then maybe you'll understand if you ever go into this sort of non-dual way of interacting in the world, you'll see how inappropriate it is for me to even say that it's, well, to say non-duality. First of all, you understand why that's inappropriate to say. You understand why it's inappropriate to say interacting or in the world. All of those words would just fall apart. They wouldn't be the appropriate way of evaluating the sort of non-dual type of thing, or there are lots of other spiritual things that just wouldn't fit. It would seem so ridiculous for the way that I'm describing these as different worldviews or different ways of engaging in the world. A lot of that just wouldn't be appropriate in some of the different worldviews and different ways of engaging in the world. It wouldn't be appropriate to call it that way. So you'll kind of get that if you ever engage in those ways, and you can understand that you can develop those. But from this vantage point, as we are describing those worldviews and ways of engaging, they are undifferentiated, and they codependently arise with what is differentiated from this perspective. Because from our perspective, we have codependent arising as a necessary part of our experience.
Like, that's what a Jedi is. A Jedi is somebody that can navigate into the space of non-duality, have a conversation. Go to the space of duality, have a conversation. Go to the space of individuation and self-actualization, and have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like you're doing. That's what I feel.
That's what a Jedi is? Jedi?
Like I've been doing is we've been training like Jedis to become polymaths, to be able to navigate the space like a Jedi.
Yes.
And then that's what sort of gives you the most holistic understanding of what the nature is.
Yes. It's only holistic from one worldview, but no less, I'm still agreeing completely. Absolutely. You want to develop all these different ways of engaging in the world. You want to be comfortable in all of them. Yes.
Okay, let me get technical here.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. And then let's wrap because I know you have to go soon, right?
Okay. But I eminently am enjoying this conversation and would like to continue.
Me too, bro. Me too.
Okay. So is the architecture more fundamental than the entities that are dependent on it? So you're saying there's duality, non-duality, and
There's duality. We've got non-duality. Your non-duality is dependent on the duality somehow. So is the ultimate reality the architecture? Or is the ultimate reality the non-duality? Which one is it?
individuation, and then there's the architecture that unites them in some way, shape, or form. So is this architecture the birthplace?
Potentially, yes. And also what
Interesting.
makes the environment the birthplace, and also what sustains the substrate of what this is. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the soil. So it's like soil.
It's like soil.
What?
Yeah, or ground is another way to potentially put it. It's like a groundless ground.
Is the architecture possible without the flower that it sprouts?
I feel like those have to codependently arise.
Okay, so then let me get technical. To say so architecture, if architecture, then duality. If duality, then architecture.
Say that one more time.
If architecture, then duality. If duality, then architecture.
Say that another way. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there is the architecture, then it's necessary that there's duality as well as non-duality. Let's just say non-duality for the sake of this. So if there's the architecture, then there's non-duality. If non-duality exists, then the architecture exists. Is that a correct statement or no? If they're codependent. So you're mentioning codependency.
Codependency.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's
yes.
say architecture exists.
Great.
Architecture is my little lip balm here. So if this guy exists, does necessarily non-dualism exist? So if this, does this necessarily exist? Non-dualism. Non-dualism is blue. Architecture is green.
Oh, I see I think I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, doesn't that also kind of play into what we were saying a moment ago with how consciousness and physicalism are ultimately one?
Well, you were saying that. Yes, yes, I understand.
Well, because you can't have in a sense, you can't have consciousness without physicalism, and you can't have physicalism without consciousness. You can't have a reality without observation, but you also can't have observation without reality. So the two are one. Yeah.
Okay. Because then if that's true, then mathematically one would say they're equivalent. And then because if you have an if-then statement in both directions, you have what's called an if and only if. Okay, so then, and that means they're isomorphic. Okay, now if they're isomorphic, that means you can replace one with the other. And so why is the prevailing place given to non-dualism over dualism or over the architecture?
And I feel like this is exactly what I was referencing with why Bernardo Kastrup and why he and others have said that they're not trying to they're just trying to help people shift to become aware of the unity, because they feel like by becoming aware of what he calls metaphysical idealism, by shifting into that position, it creates more of a sense of unity and oneness, which then when you build from that position, you can actually actualize the planet's potential at a higher degree than if you were building from the place of separation and from the place of differentiation only without having tasted the unity. And
Interesting.
so it's almost like a temporary prioritization for the turn inward in order to maximize the exterior architectural potential.
Interesting. So I feel like Atlas missed a little bit something here. Where Curt is asking, apparently we have three things which are equivalent, which is non-duality, which is equivalent to duality, which is equivalent to non-duality and duality together in the architecture that creates that sort of thing, the codependent arising. And Curt is asking, why do we focus on non-duality so much and not the duality and not the codependent arising? I think that the correct answer, or a better answer than what Atlas just gave, is that lots of different traditions focus on different things. So some traditions do focus more so on the dualities, and they focus on the dualities in such a way that it leads to understanding duality, non-duality, and codependent arising. Some traditions focus mostly on codependent arising so they can understand the duality and non-duality, and Atlas's tradition focuses on non-duality for whatever reason, and it's not even tradition, but Atlas himself personally focuses on non-duality for whatever reason, and he just gave the reason why, because he thinks that it can lead to better outcomes in behavior in the world. But if it's leading to better outcomes in the behavior of the world, that seems to be dualistic. So this is there are maybe two criticisms that are coming out of this. Why are you focusing on non-duality? And then he's giving a sort of reason that seems to be pointing towards effective behavior, in which case, well, just try to focus on the effective behavior. Don't care about the non-duality, because the non-duality is secondary. It's the thing that leads you towards better behavior. So just say the better behavior is what you're looking for. In which case, say duality is what you're trying to develop, not non-duality, and not your worldview is not caring about non-duality. It's using non-duality as a tool. So that's the one criticism, but the other one, I think Atlas could have expressed slightly better on the other thing that he's just personally expressing non-duality as his pet thing, but other traditions care about non-duality, other traditions care about codependent arising, other traditions care about dualities, and they can use them all in whatever way they wish, and there's no reason to privilege one or the other. In fact, you don't need to. You can choose different traditions to choose different things. I have to take a really short break. BRB. Oh, hello, hello, hello. Mhm. Boom, boom. Okay.
Okay. You're saying in order to. So is that goal higher than the truth that apparently is used to derive the potential to execute on that goal? So, for example, if non-dualism led to a place of destruction for the earth, would you still advocate for non-dualism? Let's hypothetically. Now, you may say logically that's impossible, but I'm saying hypothetically, and I'm sure people can entertain what's logically impossible. So, what would you do?
If somehow the turn into
Maniacally
oneness,
laughing.
if somehow the turn into
He is
oneness
maniacally
created
laughing.
more planetary catastrophe than separation.
Yeah, well,
So, man, he's not displaying any sort of flexibility in understanding the. We're speaking dualistically, so let's speak dualistically and entertain hypotheticals and understand different ways of engaging in the world. He seems to not be exuding the sort of flexible nature that he was expressing a little bit earlier, talking about holistic understanding of the world. And we don't seem to be displaying that at the moment. He seems to be rejecting the hypothetical completely here by laughing at it and kind of saying it. Well, I don't know if maybe he'll clarify a little bit more, so I don't want to assume too much here. Maybe he's laughing before he answers, so let's see.
here's one way. I mean, it's not so out of left field, because in some sense narcissism is self-love, and exaggerated self-love. Someone may say that that's not love at all, but then you're just quibbling over what love is. And
Sure.
no, that's not quibbling. Like, that's a serious issue. But it's not as if what love is trivial. So let's say narcissism, for the sake of this argument, is self-love, or overly so. Well, if we're all connected, why is self-love not the same as loving this?
Certainly is.
Loving everyone else if we're all the same. So if one has narcissism, why is that not a net increment to society rather than a decrement? Okay, so one can see how oneness can lead to a destruction of the earth, potentially in a hypothetical universe. Now, I'm asking, if that is the case, would you still follow oneness, or do you serve life higher than that? Like, what's your God? Is your God oneness, or is your God humanity?
What's your God? What's your highest value? Peterson way of speaking here, apparently. So do you care more about the value of humanity, or do you care more about the sort of non-dual oneness truth that you're referring to? Which one is most important?
Well, it's the simultaneity. Which is what we were talking about a moment ago, where you can hold both oneness and differentiation at the same time.
Very good. Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you can have the most holistic picture on how infinity expresses itself, which is what you are. You're not separate from infinity expressing itself. Mm-hmm. You are the same force that gave rise to you. And so if you know that it's both unified and differentiated, you can have the most holistic perspective and have the most, as you actualize yourself, as you firework yourself, mm-hmm. you can have it be in the most prosperous way for yourself and the collective. Because
does it necessarily need to lead to that? That's the question, though. So you build this holistic perspective of the world. Let's say somebody does this. Does it necessarily need to lead towards something that is traditionally seen as good, or like normal people would say is good? Or would it also allow for what normal people think of as bad and evil or whatever? What do you think? And if it did lead to, let's say necessarily it led to something that was bad, evil, would we be pro this sort of holistic development or not?
Because you come from the place of being truly Gnostic. Gnosis means that you have full knowledge of the nature in your being. And so when you come from a Gnostic place, you express yourself in the most coherent, most benevolent way. It's actually what Lao Tzu called Wu Wei. It's called effortless action. It's effortless because you are a Gnostic being, because you know the Tao. You are the Tao. You are it. And when you're it, you don't commit malevolence. You purify your beingness to not commit malevolence.
Let me restate the question because I'm not seeing the answer I'm not hearing how what you say connects to the question.
I think he connected quite a bit, but he's not answering directly to say yes or no. Yes, he would keep pursuing holism or non-duality or whatever spiritual, whatever you label it. He will keep pursuing it if it led to what we would traditionally see as bad outcomes, what normal people would call bad outcomes. Would he keep pursuing it or not? I think the answer should be yes, but he doesn't seem to be answering directly enough for Curt to be satisfied with that.
Question is, if the choice was, if what came with oneness was the destruction of the planet, would you still advocate for oneness? Hypothetically, I know you may say that's impossible. Well, even if you say that's impossible, then you're putting a limit on an infinite potential. So you're saying some of what is within this non-dual immaterial
that's a great point right
architecture
there, is that you can't put a limit on the infinite potential, which means that there are civilizations that potentially emerge that get so turned into oneness that somehow that turns into a disastrous scenario. That's cool.
Okay. So Curt helped him out, I guess, by giving, I don't know why that word triggered him a little bit, but yeah, he I guess, evoking limits made Atlas understand, okay, yes, it's unlimited. It's no limits. So some civilizations can do that and can go down this route of oneness with while, and that leads to the destruction of our civilization, that civilization. Okay, we can accept that. Now, the question was more specifically, would you advocate for that in your society? If your society were going down, would you advocate for that? Yes or no? Yes or no? And also, why, if we say disastrous, just to clarify, do you think it's disastrous? Or are you saying that other people would think it's disastrous? Or do you have some sort of value system for evaluating what is disastrous or not within your non-duality? So it seems like they're both following, but they're not answering.
So would you still advocate?
Atlas isn't quite answering directly.
For oneness, if oneness would lead to planetary destruction, let's say. Well, hypothetically.
The beauty of the question is we just went through one of those explorations where, as infinity expresses itself, are there potentialities where a civilization becomes overly excessively oneness and unity oriented to where it somehow blows itself up based on that? And is that a possibility? In infinite potential, we're playing with infinite possibility. So that could be, in fact, happening right now.
But would you advocate for
actually, to a certain extent, isn't that what we saw with the 20th century? We saw that with when you go overly collectivist and you don't have an equal amount of individuation and sovereignty with the individual, that's where you have the disastrous tens of millions of deaths across the overly collectivist style of,
Yes. Okay, but now it sounds like an argument for pragmatism rather than truth, as in the objective sense of truth or the correspondence sense, because you're saying, well, we need is a balance. Well, how is that balance? We need a balance between non-dualism and separation, or dualism, or plurality. Okay,
why don't we keep calling it non-duality and individuation? Seems to be a good way to put it.
Sure.
So, okay, we'll keep
between non-duality
and individuation,
oneness and individuation. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then what you say? You use the word extreme. Now, to use the word extreme already implies a value. Now, you've already valued the wholeness of the oneness of the planet, or the thriving of people, or the lessening of suffering, and so on. But that to me sounds pragmatic and not with respect to the what's true. Like, I understand that in pragmatism, they have a different definition of truth. But if you're using that definition of truth, and that's great, we need to know that. But if you're saying it's objectively true, like there's the correspondence theory of truth, there's something that's outside me that these words are somehow isomorphic to, then right.
Do you remember the story that you gave about your transpersonal experience where you
Wait, don't cut him off here. He's trying to we're getting very specific, and he's being very thoughtful too, and he's trying to express himself very cleanly and clearly. Is that what the correspondence theory is? I sometimes get mixed up with the correspondence and the coherence theory. It's obviously the two main theories of truth that a lot of people like to talk about. I thought coherence theory is when it coheres with external reality. So whatever your statement is coheres with something that is the fact in reality. So the fact of reality in your statement would cohere, and that is those things are isomorphic, which makes it true. As opposed to the correspondence theory, which is when it's logically consistent or internally consistent. But I feel like the word correspondence makes a lot more sense for corresponding to the outside world, and cohering makes a lot more sense if it's cohering with itself. Okay. I'm not going to look it up, so we'll accept it. Anyway, he's trying to describe what truth is, and one form of understanding of truth is to distinguish it from the pragmatic form of what truth is, or something that works, and which one are we more valuing? Are you valuing some truth that corresponds to the actual truth of reality or fact of the matter of reality, or some sort of external representation of reality? So do your language cohere, or is it isomorphic? Is it the same as the representation of reality that expresses itself in reality? Are those the same thing? Or are we taking what to be truth as is what is beneficial to us? Which one is it? Pragmatic theories or correspondence theories?
you felt like a tentacle of the cosmic octopus.
Uh-huh.
So that is individuation in non-duality. So it's an absolute centerlessness, which is the big cosmic storm that we are, simultaneously as it is that you are a unique individuation. You're the unique tentacle in that cosmic storm. But in order to understand that you are the cosmic storm, you have to, in a sense, you have to perforate your skin so that you can burst outside of the contracted identity of solely being an individual to also being the universe expressing itself as also Curt simultaneously, right? And I would say that's the one thing that oneness goes really far to the extreme on, and individuation goes really far to the extreme on. And if we can synthesize them into a unity, that's where the mwah is.
When you say that's something I'm getting at that I wasn't able to express before, and forgive me if I'm loose with my words, it's difficult for me to hold on to right now.
Okay, no worries.
You're using the word extreme. Now, what makes you say extreme? There's a value embedded in that. Then how do you get that value? Where are you getting this value from to say that something is extreme versus not?
Good. Well, we have at least our N of one, our own civilization, where we saw in the 20th century, we saw that shift into hyper collectivism that turned very disastrous. And we've also seen in the West, we've seen an overly excessive focus on individualism as well. And that from at least our N of one, we see that there are extremes. Actually, in Better Left Unsaid, your documentary, you explored one of those extremes, right? And so now you see where the extreme on the political right in the US and the extreme on the political left in the US have their own disastrous codes.
Yes, but just because we agree, or any other people with different worldviews agree that there are extremes, how do you come to the conclusion that they're extreme? Other people have different ways of coming to that conclusion. A normal person would say it's extreme because people suffer and we don't like suffering. Okay. How do you come to the conclusion that it's extreme? Why do you think that it's bad? If you, for some reason, Curt thinks that extreme means bad or it has some sort of value judgment. I don't really take extreme to have a value judgment, but if we're following that line of thought, that extreme means that there necessarily is a value judgment in there. How do you come to that conclusion, Atlas, that these other civilizations, which may come to some strange conclusions and have strange behavior, how do you take that as being extreme? How do you evaluate that?
And then if you can gain a higher level awareness where you can hold both of those political sides and sort of archive the codes that are malevolent and uplift the codes that are good, and merge them. That's the same thing with individualism and collectivism, non-duality and individuation, the political left and political right in the US and China. You can keep going with these dichotomies because what you want to do is you want to take the best from the two and merge them into one rather than keep playing with the polar negatives on each one of them. And that's called what I call the sorting algorithm. That's from chapter 7 of High Level Perception, the first visual synthesis that I did. And actually, I got the words sorting algorithm from Brett Weinstein when he was moderating the debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris in Vancouver. He said, when they were talking about science and spirituality and how to merge the two, Brett said, so Jordan, you have a sorting algorithm of sorts. And so that's where it was ding, 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 ding. That's what we're looking for. How do you sort the good stuff of non-duality? How do you sort the good stuff of individualism or science and spirituality or the US and China or the left and the right? And how do you merge them? That's what.
Yeah.
But then what is that system?
Alan, what I'm wondering, I know we got to get going. What I'm wondering is, you use the word good there. There's many.
Very good. How do you evaluate good?
There's much language that's value laden, and I'm wondering, where are you getting the value from? That's what I'm wondering. So when you say extreme, when you say good, why is this good and this not? And why is this extreme and this not? That's basically what I'm wondering.
So the one force that we are undergoes a process of figuring out what is most good to bring up. So we have to go through our process of sense making, right? Did you have Daniel Schmachtenberger on yet? Okay, so his thing is, communal sense making. And so we have to go through a process of figuring out how to make sense of what is good from these supposedly dual sides, and then to merge them into one. So it's not that Atlas or Curt or Rupert or Bernardo or whoever has the answer to what is good and everybody should follow that leader, but it's more like a decentralized swarm intelligence that is the life force that we are, figures out what is good, and then ends up fireworking that.
We're going to have to cut this conversation short, man.
Okay.
We'll continue later.
Yeah, that's so good. Wow.
Thank you so much, man.
Wow. Yeah,
So,
I feel
by
you.
the way,
This is a fascinating conversation. Wow.
how did you find out about the channel, and what made you reach out to me? Or I may have reached out to you.
Actually, remember I think it was in the middle of 2020. That's when you started the channel, right? Yep. Okay. So about a year ago, I was so happy that you existed, and I still am. I'm so happy because there was nobody that was doing it yet. And then you filled the spot because nobody was doing it. Nobody was interviewing these greatest minds and then trying to figure out a landscape of the theories of everything. And as soon as I saw your channel go up, I was just so pumped and so jacked. And then you did what most people can't do, which is not only did you come up with the idea, it came through you to do this, but then furthermore is you did it for a year and you've grown such a tremendous catalog of content and a tremendous free educational library around this. And then, so you've provided this great resource for people. and you've created somewhat of a monetization stability for yourself to ensure that you can independently continue doing what you're passionate about. And so I'm so jacked. But of course, take the 2 weeks of time just to rejuvenate yourself, my brother. Give your heart and your mind and your gut and your wife and just give yourself the space to just relax into the profundity of who you are and what you've achieved. Congratulate yourself for that period of a couple weeks, and then, get back to it.
Please, Curt, take care of yourself. Man, we want to see you healthy and happy. You don't need to work so hard. Okay, we like the working hard. It can be fine. Work hard if you like, but also take care of your health. Also take care of your sleep. No need to neglect all the other stuff for one form of development. You can develop in all these aspects. Please, please, please.
How long have you been doing this for? I know that yours is also extremely personal. Sorry, in person. It started out as events, as far as I know.
Yeah.
How long has that been going on? How long has the podcast been going on? And what's your goal with it?
In 2015, I initially started asking people on the streets thought-provoking questions. So about 6 years ago. And then I transitioned to hosting a science comedy show in San Francisco. And then I transitioned to hosting Simulation in 2017, which is where I was just asking these greatest minds these thought-provoking questions.
Quite young to do that. Congrats, man. You're like
Thanks,
24.
bro. At that time, exactly 24. Yep, bro. Yep. But I feel like that's 14-year-olds and 18-year-olds to begin asking these big questions at those teenage years. And in doing so, they can rocket themselves forward at unprecedented rates.
Was there a skip for a second?
I had got to get going. I've been surprised that most of my audience is actually not young. I mean, there are quite a few young people, but most of them they're far older than you would think. There's some are 60, 70, some are professors. Oh man.
Yes, bro.
Gosh.
Yes.
To receive an email from a professor or multiple is like a huge compliment, because those are the toughest crowds. And like, I used to do stand-up, and there are some crowds that are tough. Well, in this space, a professor is a tough crowd. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, well.
We have a lot of love from our audience, and we love you guys. Thank you so much. We're so grateful. You guys are coming from both of our channels, and we're so grateful that you love this and that.
It's a lot of fun.
We're going to come back. I feel like Curt and I, hopefully once every quarter or something, we'll back.
We'll check in with one another. Yeah.
Exactly.
See, this is so good, man. I love it. So again, I want to highlight that I was probably strongly misjudging in some senses here, because I feel there's a very strong disconnect between how they're communicating with each other, yet still they both seem to be very open to reconnecting again and potentially doing it on a regular basis, a semi-regular basis, once a quarter, 4 times a year. That sounds, to me, this is very strange. So I gotta take a look at how I'm evaluating normal social interactions, because they don't seem to be matching at all. They didn't seem to connect on any level at all from my perspective, from the way that I'm looking at it. But they seem to be very open with wanting to hang out again. Quite interesting to me. So fascinating.
Exactly. And thank you, everyone, and infinite love for you. Let us know how you feel about the episode in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. That simultaneity around non-duality and individuation and dualism, all this type of stuff. And also like the video and help that YouTube algorithm. Also check out the links in the bio to subscribing to Curt's channel. Also, you can find his recent documentary, Better Left Unsaid, down there as well. And subscribe to our channel, Simulation, if you haven't yet. Share this video on Theories of Everything, where we have this conversation with other people that you feel like this would profoundly resonate with. And that is all. We love you, fam. Anything else, Curt?
Yeah, what I'm trying to build with Theories of Everything is both, I don't want to use the word 2.0, it's so old now, but something like Science 2.0 or Science 3.0. Think about this. Science progressed. It wasn't science before, and then it became this now, which means that you can wonder, just a thought experiment, what will it be? And what's the criteria for what makes something science?
Yeah, hopefully we don't get too caught up in trying to make science 2.0, right? Because we don't want to only bring in the assumptions or bring in mostly heavily the assumptions of science, right? Because you could just as easily call it religion 2.0, where you include a religion and science and you try to integrate them. Or maybe you can call it conspiracy theory 2.0, or maybe you can call it fringe something 2.0, or because you're mixing all these things, or at least the goal is to integrate and mix all these things in some, well, at least somewhat equal proportion, or maybe somewhat appropriate proportions. I'm not sure how equal or not equal, but we don't want to necessarily assume that science is going to get be the most intact part in this sort of new evolution of something new, some new form of evaluating a more broader section of what we consider to be our reality. So maybe be careful there with the science 2.0 thing, but still the whole goal of having new forms of evaluating or strengthening our forms of engaging in the world and evaluating the world seems to be a very good, well, I like it personally. So call it science 2.0, call it religion 2.0, call it morality 2.0, call it whatever you want to call it. Doesn't really matter, but we want to be sure to be broad and open and see forth this new development of our society and our way of interacting within the world.
And partly what I'm doing with theories of everything is not only advancing the state of theories of everything by explicating toes, but also what does the next science look like? I have a couple of names for it. One is, I can't pronounce it, but abgenosis. And the reason why is because
Genosis.
abgena means knowledge to the eastern end.
Abgenosis.
It's a specific kind of knowledge. And then the gnosis obviously means knowledge to the west. And I imagine that there's going to be an integration of the two. I also imagine that there's going to be a third. I don't see why there's just a dichotomy. Maybe there's one that we haven't come up with. We think experience is primary now, but maybe 100 years from now, it's beyond, it's transcended experience and rationality. It's something else. I don't know. It sounds, I don't know, but either way, I'm trying to build that with the channel. I also have a Discord on the channel. For the channel, for this. So join go to theories of everything, search theories of everything on YouTube. You'll see it. Apparently looks like a Reese's peanut butter cup logo.
The link is in the bio below. And also join it.
Are you vegan?
Am I
vegan?
Oh, no, but I'm not especially carnivorous either, but I don't. Yeah.
A weird way to answer that. No, not vegan. No. It's interesting. Here we're talking earlier about what were we talking about earlier about the how everything is one and how that changes how we interact with things and how it will necessarily make us better. We didn't necessarily say that, but it was kind of implied a little bit, and it wasn't, when it was challenged, it wasn't really clarified a lot at all. So when you realize that we're all one, will that make us better in the world? And if it made us worse, or if it didn't change anything, would we still advocate for it? Well, in this case, we've got people who are eating animals a lot. This is a horrible thing from the perspective of a lot of people. So when you recognize that you and the animals are one, does that change your behavior and make you interact with them better? Does that make you a vegan? I don't think this is the line of thought that Curt, I don't know why he's asking about veganism. He just randomly asked that. It's at the end of the video, so I don't know why he's asking this. But anyway, that's you think he's just concerned about his audience? That's possible. And a lot of spiritual people, there seems to be a bit of an overlap for spiritual people and vegans sometimes. In some cases, I can understand how spirituality can be used to justify veganism in some cases, so, potentially. But it seems if Curt were to ask that question a little bit earlier when they were actually having that conversation about how seeing oneness may change your behavior for the good, that would be a very good type of more devastating question. His questioning, his line of questioning was already pretty hardcore. I don't think that Atlas did a very good job at some of the points for keeping up with the questions, but that would have been even much tougher to question how he's interacting in the world and if it's ethical or acceptable. Anyway, I don't think that's the line of thought that Curt's going down. I don't know why he's asking this question. Why does it matter?
I don't have a food. Do
Honestly,
you?
I'm just rapacious. No, I eat whatever most of the
Rapacious.
time.
Yeah.
I don't like fish. I don't like seafood, but except salmon. I like salmon.
Thanks for patience.
By the way, we had another. Remember, I messaged you. This Brando from our channel said, "Hope we have an episode with Frank Yang. I think Curt can make amazing interview with him."
Greedy.
Remember, I messaged you and said that it could.
Curt just says, "I'm greedy, rapacious." Interesting. What a word. Frank Yang and Curt. Do you think that'd be interesting?
Be good for you to have Frank Yang and Bentinho Massaro on the show for Theories of Everything. So that's something to also consider. I will message you about it again. We'll talk about it again right after this. Okay, love you guys. I'm going to end the broadcast. We'll stay in the studio for just a minute.
Okay.
We'll talk to you guys soon. We'll see you on again soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Curt. Thanks, Atlas. Wow, much appreciated. A very good stream. I thought it was a lot of fun. How cool is that? Okay. Well, and then potentially in the future, Frank Yang or Bentinho Massaro with Curt. I don't think Frank Yang, I'm not sure if Frank Yang would be a good fit because he doesn't have a very, I'm not sure if he has a fleshed out worldview that would be, does he have a fleshed out, I don't know if he has a fleshed out worldview at all to express to Curt. Now it'd be very interesting to see Bentinho Massaro, definitely. And I'm fairly sure, I can't remember when, but Leo Gura is going to be going on Curt's show very soon. I think it's in a couple days, I think, actually. I think it's this month. He's got Leo Gura coming on. So that's going to be super interesting. But I really don't think that Frank Yang has enough of a worldview that's fleshed out that would need to be investigated or spread in the way that Curt wants to spread it or investigate. Certainly it'd be interesting. It seems like Curt has a lot of time, enough time to be open and hang out with people without really getting a lot out of it. Right? He just hung out with Atlas, and that was an hour and a half. And he said he would accept an even longer interview. So it seems like he's comfortable having long conversations without necessarily getting a whole lot of detail out of it. So in that case, I think it'd be very fun to see Frank Yang and Curt talk. But I can't imagine what usefulness would come out from Curt's perspective. Or from Frank's perspective. I just think it'd be interesting. Interesting. Okay, anyway, that's just a side note. Bentinho Massaro, though, on the other hand, has a lot of really, really fleshed out worldview with probably some interesting justifications and methods for determining all the things. That would be interesting to see. I'd love to see that one. And I don't even know Bentinho Massaro's worldview very much, so good on many fronts. I gotta say something in the comments. I'm not sure what to say, though. Men must bring order. No, we're not going to watch this video. What is this? No. Wow. Thanks for the recommendation. Okay, guys. Well, it is my time to depart. It has been fun. I had a good time. I am going to eat myself some lunch. I may actually come back for Twitch. So, Twitch folks, be vigilant, I guess. I'll be coming back. Why do I ignore videos that have the word men in it? If it said gays, would I watch it? If it said femboys, I'd be more inclined to watch it. So, next video that has femboy in the title, we'll definitely be watching that one. If it said femboys must bring order, oh boy, I'd be interested. But men? It's not the year of the man. Not today. It's the femboy summer. Okay. I may be back on Twitch. I may be playing video games. Whoa. Who'da thunk it? I can play video games. Apparently, I got a big donation very recently from one of our chatters who sent a video game. So I may give that a shot. Probably in an hour or so back on Twitch, but not on YouTube. So look out for that if you are interested in playing video games or watching me play video games. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but we'll try it out. Something new, some other form of development that we can try to investigate and explore together. But right now I'm off for lunch, so I'm going to go enjoy my lunch, and then I'll be back after a little bit of rest. Hopefully you all are taking good care of yourselves, making sure that you're all healthy and happy, and not overworking yourselves, and so on and so forth, and getting prepared for this beautiful weekend that we have ahead of us. So I'll be back on Monday with more of this sort of video review, spiritual content, and blah, blah, blah. You know what we do on our channel. But in the meantime, I may be back for video games, so that'd be cool. I'll see y'all